I'd like to open the July 12, 2021 meeting of the Acton Select Board. I'd like to make note at this point that under 940 CMR 29.10 Section 5, Jim Snyder will be participating remotely during the meeting due to a geographic distance greater than 20 miles via video conference. Please note that a quorum is physically present. Roll call votes will be required for any and all votes involving members participating remotely. And certainly most of us can see Jim in all of his glory right here. And we'll get the meeting started. First item of business, as it always is citizens' concerns. If we have any concerns, if anyone would like to address any issues that are not going to be addressed in the regular agenda, please come forward.
This is Tara, but I'm uncomfortable. Is this Zoom?
Please, for anybody speaking, I need your full name and street address, please.
Yes, I was just asking, can anyone where this information will go? Is this going on to a corporate, is it Zoom or whatever this is?
We're broadcasting on ActonTV, on Zoom, on YouTube Live, maybe even on the radio.
All right, so that's all I'll say is Tara from West Acton. And I would like you
please, your full name and street address.
That's my full name, that's my street address.
What, street, please?
That's West Acton, I'm in West Acton.
Street, please?
That's my street. Would you like to hear my concern?
We have one set of rules for everyone, and we always insist that people provide their street address.
Yes, this is a constitutional issue because it's being broadcast over a corporate network that preserves the right to sell our data. And so I have concerns about privacy and safety regarding privacy. And so I'd like to share my concern, if that's all right.
As soon as you properly identify yourself.
Well, I have an issue with the citizens' concern. I think it should be residents' concern, not citizens, because a lot of people aren't citizens. Thank you.
Okay, any other concerns?
Clara Siska, 14 Stowe Street. Speaking on behalf of the Dog Park Committee, we are immensely gratified that 2/3 of town meeting members embraced our vision and endorsed both the funding and the 348 Main Street location for Acton's Dog Park. We want to express our deepest appreciation for Select Board members past and present, the town manager, town council, and those in the Land Use Department for their hard work and unwavering support. We are both honored and humbled by the responsibility with which you have entrusted us. While the Dog Park Committee transitions to grant writing and design efforts, the Friends of Acton Community Dog Park, led by Kathy Fochman, continues to raise additional funds and has already begun establishing partnerships with individuals and groups to conceptualize enhancements to 352 Main Street to complete the transformation of those highly visible properties. We again commit to being wholly transparent, forthcoming, and inclusive in our process, and we invite anyone who is invested in the outcome to join us in both envisioning and establishing a wonderful multi-use space for residents, both four-legged and two-legged. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns?
Mr. Chair, this is Matt. From the virtual side of things, do you want me to raise when there are people who want to participate remotely?
Would you repeat that, Matt, please?
Sorry, I'm having some audio issues. We have a few hands up remotely. Do you want to take those now?
We've got one more in the audience, and then we'll take the remote ones. Thank you.
Charlie Cadillac, Bolivia Road. I have some comments on your item 7, so I would like to be recognized at that time.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road. First of all, before my comments, I want to welcome the two new members of the board, Fran and Himija. And I also want to thank the existing members of the board, Dean and Jim and David, for all your service during the pandemic. You guys took personal risks in your work, and it really needs to be applauded. And I say the same for John and Mark, who are representing all of town staff that I know took incredible personal risks as well. So thank you very much. The one comment I wanted to make is that I know that the goal setting session is going to be coming up shortly. And I know that there has been a lot of talk around Board of Selectmen members that we want to be more diverse and we want to be representing a wider group of people in this town, especially people who are vulnerable and don't usually have access to select board meetings. One of the things that's always confounded me is that the one time it seems that we don't allow public comment is when we have the goal-setting session. I know that there's a process for people to submit comments by email, but it's not the same. We all know what the advantages are of having these open comments in a public session where there can be back and forth and where people can share ideas. So I urge the board to make a change and to strongly recommend that we do, in addition to having people contribute through email comments, to allow in-person public comments at the goal-setting session. These are the people's goals, and the people need to be part of that discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Matt, if you have anyone in the virtual audience wishes to speak?
We do have a couple. So everyone knows there are 28 people currently here remotely. First up to speak is Alyssa Nichols. Alyssa Nichols, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. This is Alyssa Nichol from 76 School Street. I wanted to speak to item number 11, but wanted to find out if that was possible because I have not yet witnessed any public comments during board discussions of open meeting law complaints. So if that's not going to be possible later on in the meeting, I'd like to make them now.
We will be taking comment on those.
Thank you. Sorry, you said that you're taking the comments then?
Yes, we will take comments then.
All right, thank you.
All right, our next hand up is from Erica Chen. Erica Chen, you should be able to speak.
Hi, Erica Chim, 14 Heald Road, and I did want to speak to item number 7, but it's a little broader than that, so you can tell me whether I should take the minute or two now or later.
Erica, we did get your email, and I think it's probably more appropriate that we do that later as part of that whole discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, that completes the request to speak.
That's all from the virtual audience.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think we'll hold off on the chair update because we have a notice hearing for 7:10 p.m. I will read the notice.
Notice
Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138, Section 12
of the
of the General Laws. The Select Board will hold a public meeting on July 12, 2021 at 7:10 p.m. in Room 204 at Acton Town Hall, 472 Main Street, on the application of Donald Supermarkets Incorporated for multiple amendments on a Section 12 wine and malt license at 248 Great Road, Acton, for change in manager, change of officers, change of directors, and transfer of stock. The application may be inspected at the town manager's office during normal business hours. We have a representative from Donald's.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Alex Parent of DOC Levine. With me tonight, members of the telephone, the Hyundai co-pilot, also is Kathy Roth, who's the new proposed license manager. Carl Cross, who's the attorney for the Donlands on the medical emergency. He cannot be here tonight. My understanding is that Jack Donlan is going to participate remotely. I don't know if you can see whether he's on the screen or not. So, the application that's in front of you is the result of a stock purchase agreement in which the Patels are going to purchase all of the stock interest in Donlan Supermarkets Inc. And as part of that transaction, the amendments to the liquor license are being proposed. So the first change in stock ownership from the Donlan brothers to the Patel family. Mohammed will be a 50% owner. And three other members of the family will be minority investors. Gopal, sitting next to me, is going to be the president, treasurer, clerk of the corporation. And lastly, Kathy Roth, who's been employed by Donlands since 1987, has been the director of beer and wine for Donlands. Since 2000, will be taking over the position of license manager. I know there's a big pile of paper. We tried to give you a summary to make it a little simpler. That's the essence of what's going on. There's probably less here than meets the eye given the size of the pile of paper. A lot of continuity. Donlands will continue to be Donlands. Employees are staying on. Kathy, who has a lot of experience running the beer and wine section of Donlands, is staying on. She's tip certified, and she has a wealth of experience in managing procedures at Donlands for compliance with the liquor laws. So that's the executive summary. We're here to answer any questions that you may have. And I turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from the board? David.
Hi. I just wanted to confirm so that you don't envision any, general changes to Donald's. They're still going to, the nature of the store will be about the same. I understand it might sell different things or whatever. The nature of the store will be about the same. We'll be a grocery store, selling alcohol, beverages, beer and wine. No other general changes.
Hello everyone. We're going to remain the same as Donlands Supermarket. We will not change anything, but we may add more product. We probably going to find out what demographic looking for certain product and we add for the convenience. That's about it. But everything will remain the same. The policies, operation, the people, and business. Yes.
Thank you. And are you also buying the other Donlands markets or just the one in Acton?
Everyone.
Yeah,
Wayland, Littleton, and Acton.
Thank you. And Mr. Manager, have there been any complaints against Donald for alcohol?
Not that I'm aware of.
No license violations or alleged license violations? Thank you.
Just so you know, Wayland, Littleton, and Lincoln have all approved the application.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider-Grant.
Is the applicant aware of the Board of Health permitting requirements for this transaction?
If I can address that, Cheryl Ball had sent out a memo. I did discuss that with her. She was on the understanding that the entity would change. She has indicated to me that we do not need to change the existing licenses.
Great, thank you. I got no more questions.
Okay. Lisa, do we have a specific motion that we should be reading to transfer these? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the transfer of licenses for beer and wine licenses and other related licenses for Donlands.
So moved.
Can I have a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Nagarani? Ms. Arsenault? Aye. Mr. Schneider-Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
And I also say aye. So that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good luck with your business.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Go back onto the printed agenda. We'll do a chair update, town manager update, and member minutes. As acting chair, I just have one update that I would like to bring to everyone's attention. A fellow graduate of Acton Boxborough High School, class of 68, and great guy and great co-worker passed on, Carl Robinson. He had served a number of years as a captain in the Acton Fire Department. He was first brought on the force in 1972. He'll certainly be missed. 71 years old, much too young. There will be the arrangements. Visiting hours are Wednesday, July 14th, Acton Funeral Home, 472 Mass Ave, from 2 to 3 p.m. for first responders, and then open to the public from 3 to 7 p.m. And certainly my personal sympathies to Carl's family. He was a great guy, and he'll be certainly missed. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Welcome to the new board members. Nice to see the audience back in the room, and nice to see everybody in person again. I just wanted to take a moment, now that we're back in person, to thank the IT staff. Mark Hall and Matt Frost lead a very dynamic group of IT professionals that help do a lot of things for this organization, including setting us up tonight for a hybrid meeting. So I just wanted to thank them for that. I also want to mention Andrea Rustine, our Public Facilities Director. While it was unfortunate this building was closed and this meeting room was vacant for over a year, it also gave us an opportunity to do some pretty interesting and exciting things. Andrea and her team helped construct a fully accessible bathroom for use by members in this meeting room. We also hired a plaster expert to redo all of the plaster for this entire room. And then we had the entire room repainted. And a special thanks to resident Peter Darlow, who volunteered his time and expertise to help us select paint colors that honored the paint theme for this beautiful room, but brightened them up a little bit. So thank you to all those folks. and more out on the street type of updates. With a lot of rain over the last few days, we've been very closely watching the River Street Dam. We brought in an inspector from the state today to look at it, and we've been monitoring it hourly. It appears to be okay, and even though it's been heavy rain, the dam held up, and we have a plan in place if anything changes. The state announced that they are closing lanes starting Friday at 8 p.m. on Route 2 for the bridge work related to the Bruce Freeman Trail. They've been working on it for a while. You've seen the nice embankments on both sides. They're going to actually lay the steel across the roadway starting Friday night and through Saturday. So there'll be weekend traffic and detours and closures on Route 2 this weekend. So stay tuned for that. I also want to mention that we met as a group to start talking about the September 11th event that we'll be holding this year. This is the 20th year since it happened, so we're starting to plan that. It's on a Saturday this year, and more details to follow. Just wanted to mention that. On High Street, we've got some concerns about a tree, which board members may remember. We talked about a year ago, or maybe half a year ago. It's something that I think I'm going to bring back to the board because it's looking like a safety hazard, so I wanted to just mention that to you with more to come on that. And finally, the board approved an agreement to work with Concord to try to develop a combined dispatch program, and I'm very pleased to announce that a few weeks ago we were awarded $900,000 from the state 911 grant agency to help us pursue that. So we're working on that this summer. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Member minutes. David?
Hi, I just have two quick things. First, weekend train service resumed this month. In the same way that or a similar way to the weekday service is every hour at the same minute past the hour, both inbound and outbound. Outbound service is every 2 hours at the same minute past the hour. I think it's on the even hours. I don't know. But there also are exceptions at either end. So you have the first and last trains are a little bit different. But anyway, weekend train service is back as of July. Second thing I wanted just to mention, in case people hadn't heard, is one of our state reps, Tammy Gouveia, is running for lieutenant governor. And Vivian Burchell, who currently works for ActonTV and used to work in the planning department here, is running for state representative in Tammy's spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Arsenault?
No member minutes today.
Okay. Ms. Negrete? Okay. Thank you. We'll move on then to the new and special business. Item 4 is the reorganization of the board. Now, Jim, sorry. You're so big, I can't understand why I didn't see you.
Yeah. What would be a good way for me to signal my interest in speaking, Mr. Acting Chair? Raising my hand is good?
There we go. Okay,
great. I will do that. Let's see. I think my committees actually don't have anything to report right now. I just wanted to express my thrill that Fran and Himija have joined the board. You each had a lot of things in your platform, interests and skills that you wanted to work on, but I wanted to acknowledge my excitement that there's an overlap, that you both indicated a strong interest in working on racial justice issues. And it's great to have the board be supplemented with your passion about these issues. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Apologies. Jim. Sorry. Totally flustered here. All right. Reorganization of the board. As you know, I've been serving as vice chair for the last year, and David's been serving as clerk. and we need to establish who the officers will be for the coming year. If anyone has a motion that they might like to present?
I have a motion. I have a little bit of road reading, and I just wanted to discuss the process for selecting the chair position. Firstly, I wanted to express my gratitude to the townspeople of Acton who elected me to the select board seat, which I wholeheartedly embrace. I take the duties that come along with this great honor very seriously, and I'm excited to represent the many constituents I have had the pleasure of meeting and hearing from while campaigning, and more recently while out in the community. The murmurings I have also heard is that there is a natural progression for select board officers to be chosen. That is moving with tradition in succession from vice chair to chair and clerk to vice chair. While I respect every member of this board for their hard work they volunteer to the town of Acton, I feel that as a town governing body should move toward inclusivity and progression. I move to nominate David Martin as chair, and I would like a second.
I think this would be a great thing to discuss, so I will second this for the purpose of discussion.
Okay, the motion's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Jim?
I agree, Fran, that there's nothing written in stone about this habit, this practice of moving vice chairs to chairs and clerks up to vice chair. I think in this case, I'm in favor of it. I've had a chance to work with Dean for a year, and we've certainly had policy differences, but I've seen him as someone who is a good listener and is learning and growing, and has been able to be the chair a few times in John's absence or when there was the appearance of conflict of interest. So I think he'd make a fine chair in this case. I'm sure David will also make a fine chair someday if he, if the board moves that way and elections move that way.
David?
Yes, first I'd like to say that, I've in working with Dean, I've found him always to be an honest and honorable person. I can't tell you the number of times that I've collaborated with Dean on various things. I was, however, in April, extremely disappointed, right? We, at that time, I felt needed to make a change to maintain the honor and integrity of the board and the honor and integrity of the town. And we didn't make that change, and I was just hugely disappointed. And at that time, I desperately wanted Dean to be chair, and I nominated him to be chair. And Dean and the majority of the board at the time voted against that. So I'll leave it open here. I'm open to serve as chair if that's the will of the board, or I'm either way. Thank you.
Imogen?
Thank you. Yes, to echo what everyone... Is that better? Great. To echo what everyone has said, definitely recognizing that, everyone on this board has done an incredible job in, maintaining the work of the select board and really hearing citizens' concerns and thoughts along the way has been great. I think that for me, the most important thing is not just upholding tradition for tradition's sake, but more so using it as a framework, a potential framework, but really seeing where the most need and benefit can be. I think for me, I echo a lot of the values that everyone here has. And for me, it really comes down to priority. I think that given the turmoils that we've faced over the year and that we continue to face when it comes to really making sure Acton is an inclusive space, emulating that both here on the select board and in the greater community. I think that it should be a priority, and I think what really resonates me with having David serve as chair is having that be the focal point and having that be a priority of the select board moving forward. But I think, again, you know, Dean, you have done an incredible job stepping in, and I think that, you know, regardless of how we as a body decide to move, I think we'll all be able to respect each other and respect the residents of this town, and really respect the values that we should be upholding as Acton residents. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, to make the last comments, I guess, you know, certainly it has been a fractious year that we've gone through, and, you know, certainly the texture of the board has changed somewhat with 2 new members. I look forward to, if the board decides to keep me on and elevate me to chair, I look forward to serving the town in that capacity in a respectful and collaborative manner. And, you know, we'd be ready to take a vote. I see it appears that we have people waiting to make comments, so I'll open it up to the public.
Claire Siska, Stowe Street. I've known Jim and David both for much longer than I've known Dean. I respect all of you in a lot of ways. I would like to speak in support of Dean's chairship. I think the progression has less to do with history than it has to do with a learning process. And running the town government is a very complex process, and I think the graduation from clerk to vice chair to chair works to support that. Sorry, I wasn't prepared didn't know this was going to come up. I think those lessons take time, and Dean has served in this town for over 40 years, both as an employee and now as a volunteer, and I can't, you know, with all due respect, David and Jim, and you know, politically, I'm much more akin to these guys than I am to Dean, but we've come to know each other over the last year, and I think his expertise is extremely valuable. I also think, in due respect to our new board members, both of whom I welcome, I think to have 2 new people on the board, I would prefer to have somebody who has the most experience. So I support Dean's chairship. Thank you.
I'm speaking to Fran and Hemija. There's a lot more to the board's position than racial equality, equity, and inclusiveness. Dean has served on something very important called the ALG, which helps set the budget and all this. David has not. Dean has experience in doing that. David will get his experience this year as vice chair. And this is a progression of learning. Has nothing to do with things outside of running of town government in the whole, and helping the town manager make sure that the Board of Selectmen is strong enough to put forward the priorities of the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, or whatever you want to call yourselves, the Select Board, against or in concert with the Finance Committee and the School Committee. If you do not have a strong person as chair of the Select Board's position in the ALG, you will find yourself as a total board in a much weaker position against some very strong advocates for things like the schools and cutting taxes and other kinds of things, so which will impact your programs that you want to put forward in the future. And you will find that you will be a lesser board because of it. So I think that Dean should continue in his position, and David should get the chops that he needs as a vice chair and serve on the ALG in that position and not as chair. Oh, I didn't say who I was, but that's okay. Is it?
This is Tara, and I just want to point a fact that when I was selectman, I didn't get to be vice chair or chair, despite the tradition, because I was told that my views were so different than everybody else's. And so, personally, if Dean is the chair, since the chair controls the agenda, it's a very important position, it would hopefully help my tree, the whole, he's been working really hard on tree preservation policies. But I have to say that watching David in the DEIC meetings, even though David and I disagree on a lot of stuff, I was really impressed with how welcome he made the whole process seem to people that had never worked on committees before, and that would make me really proud of the town. Thank you. So.
Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road. You know, we've all been through a lot, and here we are back here. And in some ways, it's a different world since the pandemic. And one of the things that we've seen during the pandemic is we saw the effect of it on our most vulnerable people. And we saw how people reached out and were better able during the pandemic to identify whether it be people who were low income, whether it be the incredible response to the George Floyd incident and the better understanding of racial justice throughout our community. So I do think that different times call for different processes. And I have to say, especially as all of that led up to a contentious election, I really saw David Martin shine, and especially when he spoke out at a meeting, rightly so, and said, "This isn't right, cut it out," and I'm paraphrasing. And that's the type of leadership that we need from a chair at a time when we have a much better understanding of what inclusivity means. And if I thought that David wasn't qualified in other ways, you know, whether it be working with the school committee or working with the finances, I think we all know the type of experience David has working with committees in our town. So I have no concerns about that. I really do think that given everything that's happened, David is the right person to lead the board and have the responsibility for the agenda going forward this year. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other comments from the audience or from the virtual audience? Matt?
Mr. Chair, there are no comments at this time from the virtual audience.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Clerk, could you read the motion again and call the roll?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder-Grant? Nay. Mr. Charter? Nay. And I say aye. So that passes 3-2. Okay, congratulations. Sorry. And I will yield the chair. But since we're on the subject, can we just finish up getting the rest of the board in place? Okay. So we need to elect a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? I would nominate Jim Snyder-Grant as vice chair.
I second.
Made and seconded. Any other nominations? Any comments? Jim?
So I entered this evening expecting that perhaps I would be clerk this time. The notion of being vice chair is both, I'm honored and I'm frightened. So, you know, if the board decides that I should be vice chair, I'll go along, but I'll say that my preference would be to have Dean as vice chair and me as clerk. But there it is. That's my preference.
So was your motion seconded?
Yes, it was. Any further discussion or any other nominations? Dave?
Well, Dean made a motion.
Yep.
Right, so we only have one motion on the floor.
Yep.
Right? So Jim said he'd actually, sorry, thank you. Jim said he'd actually prefer to be clerk. Are you willing to be vice chair?
I'm certainly willing to be vice chair. I got the job down now. And David and I have always had as he noted, we differ on a lot of things, we agree on a lot of things, and we've always managed to find some common ground. So I'd be happy to continue on as vice chair.
So given that, you know, I'm going to vote against this particular motion since it seems that, anyway, you know, I'm willing to go with the preference of the candidates.
Well, just to dispose of it, let's bring it to a vote. The motion that I made and it was seconded, let's bring that to a vote so that we can dispose of that. Jim?
I would be curious to hear from the board, the other board members before we took a vote, just so I can understand the context of the nomination and you know, what's going on about this. If they had any comments.
I would fully support you as vice chair if you were to take that position, Jim. I initially had named who I would like to see in the position, but wouldn't vote for it if you didn't want to do it. So that's really all I have to say.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, Jim, I think you would be a wonderful vice chair, and along that same vein, I think Dean has done an incredible job this year and would continue to do an incredible job in the role. For me, it always comes down to priorities, what I hope to see this board really champion. I really relate to your focus on environmental issues, environmental justice. I think that's a lens through which we should be really employing in a lot of our town business. But yeah, it's really up to what you feel comfortable doing and what Dean feels comfortable doing, since both of you are going to have to do the job. So yes, echo what Fran said.
I see we have a citizen.
Actually, I'd like to make a point of order about the previous vote that was taken. I don't know if I can do that at this point.
Well, please.
I would like to fall short of making an accusation, but the sense that I have is that the motion to move Mr. Martin into the chairship, it's just a sense that I have that it had been previously discussed by people on, I'd like to speak. It seems to me that it had been previously discussed, and if 3 members of the board have discussed that out of the context of a meeting, that would be inappropriate, and I would need some reassurance from all of the members of the board that this is new and only came up tonight. Otherwise, we have a conflict that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Would any members of the board care to address that?
I assure you that this was what I planned to do tonight, and I didn't have a discussion with anyone previously except for one board member before I was even on the board. So.
Yes, would also like to comment on that. This was in compliance with open meeting law. I had discussed this with one board member and one board member only, and that did not satisfy a quorum. So.
I didn't discuss who would be nominated with anybody. I did discuss the procedure with one more board member. That's all.
Jim, do you have any comments?
Sure. Have an early conversation with Fran, in which I discouraged the notion, but we did talk through, the pros and cons. And with Himija, we just talked about the process. We just talked about, what would likely, the nominations and what would go on, but we didn't talk about any particular candidates.
Okay, and
One came as somewhat of a surprise to me. So, back to what we have on the floor, a motion that was seconded for Jim Snyder Grant to take over as vice chair, but I think, and Jim's made his comments, and we have one more member of the public.
I just want to, Danny Factor, 11 Davis Road. I just want to echo, Himija pointed to environmental issues. And one of the things about us all, being back here is that there's more and more slow, maybe not fast enough, but understanding at the Board of Selectmen that we have a climate emergency. And this has now been confirmed that we have a consensus in the town through town meeting that recognizes this. And I just want to vouch for the work that Jim has done throughout his life and leading Green Acton also, and on the board with his leadership as far as the climate emergency and other environmental issues. So if we're talking about leadership in the board for 2021, especially with the time clock ticking, I think that Jim would make an excellent vice chair. I think he's the person to be it, and I know a lot of others would support him being in that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've got a motion for Jim Snyder Grant for vice chair. It's been seconded. Let's take a roll call vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Nagarati?
Nay.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
I'm very confused and conflicted at this point. So I think what that means is I would abstain.
okay. Mr. Charter? Nay. And I say nay.
So that,
fails
3 to 1
3.
with 1 abstention.
All right, do we have any other nominations? Mr. Martin?
I nominate Dean Charter for vice chair.
You have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, Dean Charter for vice chair. Any other discussion? Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Nagarati?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
And I say aye, so that's unanimous.
All right, one last piece of business, the coveted role of clerk. Mr. Martin?
I nominate Mr. Snyder Grant to be clerk.
I second that.
Mr. Snyder Grant is clerk, made and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Clerk, your last roll.
Ms. Nagarati?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
And I say aye, so that's unanimous.
All right. We have a board. Mr. Martin, congratulations.
Thank you. Just a quick question, John. Is it permissible for a remote person to do the roll call in a traditional meeting? I mean, it was during the pandemic, but I don't know whether I believe in the before pandemic days, the roll call vote had to be done from the local site. Is that right?
I'm going to allow it. I mean, I don't know. It's the first time we've ever encountered it, so whatever you're comfortable with.
Are you comfortable calling the roll from remotely, Jim?
I am. For my benefit, it would be great to have Himija and Fran just pronounce their names to me out loud so we can all get to learn the correct way to pronounce them and so that I can pronounce them correctly when I call the roll, if that would be permissible to you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll go first because I have the more complicated name. So the way I pronounce it is Himija Nagarati with a hard G.
And I can
repeat that again if you'd like.
I think I'm all set, Ms. Nagarati.
Thanks, Jim.
And it's a Fran Arsenault, hard T.
Yeah, I've pronounced that name both ways. Yeah. So you should know that we definitely got a hard T. Thank you.
So you can pass these down. Yep. Thank you. So then, the next item on the agenda is discuss board and committee liaison assignments. So the things I just passed down are the current or past assignments from the last board, just because as we go through them, we can scribble on these. This could be a complicated process. I'm open to however people would like to do it. Should we go down committee by committee as a starting point? And, people can make comments as to whether they'd like to see it stay the same or move. I also think, just before we get started, and I think it's been the past case, if someone really wants to hold on to a committee assignment, they can. Does that make sense to everybody, or do we not want to do that? Any comments?
I'd stick with that if you really want one. Presumably you've developed an expertise, so stick with it.
Okay. So the first one is the 53 River Street Master Plan Committee. I'm currently liaison there. I'm happy to continue to hold that. The next one is the Acton Community Housing Corp. John held that previously, so that needs to be reassigned.
So, just a comment, if I may.
Please.
I think there's some value of having the same person do the ACHC and the AHA to sort of to cover the housing. I'm willing to be that person. I'm also willing to move away from the AHA if there's somebody on the board that wants to take both the ACHC and the AHA.
I'd be happy to do that, Jim, if you were.
By do that, you
mean
take both?
Take both.
Any objections? So the next two would go to Fran.
By me, and I'm happy to, debrief with Fran and let her know what's going on, what's been going on with the AHA, which is a lot.
Okay. The ALG, I think it has to be the chair and vice chair. So there's not a choice there, I think.
I have no problem with that.
The acting nursing service was previously Joan.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to take on that. If anyone else wants to take that on, that's fine, but happy to do that.
Okay, great. I'm assuming people will speak up or raise their hand if they'd like to make a counter proposal for any of these. Next is ActonTV.
I know it has John's name on it. I'm happy to take it.
Okay. Great. The Water District, Jim, I think, are you willing to stick with that?
Yes, I've been very happy with the combination of both the Water District
and the Water Resources Advisory Committee. Yeah, so I'm willing to continue.
Okay. The AB Cultural Council?
I've been doing that. I note that they have a very well set up process. They haven't needed much support. They also meet on Monday nights. So I have done very little with the Acton Boxborough Cultural Council. I'm certainly willing to continue, but if there's someone who's particularly drawn to it, I don't have any deep investment in continuing as their liaison. I don't think they would miss me.
Okay. But you're willing to just keep it? Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a counter proposal? The next two of the
School District Building Committee and the School Committee. I currently have both of those. Leaving it the way it is. The Agricultural Commission, Dean, you're...
Yeah, I'll stick with that unless somebody else wants it.
Okay. The Board of Appeals and Board of Assessors, or Board of Appeals, we'll do one at a time there. So there's, that's the ZBA, I assume. Doesn't say zoning, but.
So do those go hand in hand?
No, I don't think so. And
No.
actually, I don't know much about the board, attending I've never attended a Board of Assessors meeting. Board of Appeals meetings I've attended.
Because I'm happy to do the Board of Assessors. I'm jumping ahead.
Okay, and the
Board of Appeals, I can take.
Okay. The next is the Board of Health.
I would love to do the health one if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that is okay, because I think, I may end up with too many, so that's actually great.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it.
The Cable Advisory Committee was John.
I feel compelled to take all of John's committees. I would be happy to do that.
Okay. The Cemetery Commission was Joan.
Happy to take on that.
Okay. The Acton 2020 community plan was Jim, and although I'm not sure that they've met.
My understanding at the time I took that was sort of a placeholder for
when we actually start the next master planning process.
Right.
And I'm happy to continue to be on call and to help with the groundwork for getting that started.
Okay.
I see that it's funded in the long range capital plan. There's room for it to start soon. So looking forward to that.
The CPC, Dean?
Yep,
Yep,
I keep that.
Great. The Conservation Commission, also you?
Unless somebody wants it, I'll stick with that.
Council on Aging? That was also you?
That was also me, and I'll stick with that.
Okay. The Commission on Disabilities, Jim?
Yeah, my heart's there. I would love
To stay, and if anyone else would like to join and take it over, I'm willing to talk about it, but I do love it.
Okay. Great.
The DRB?
I'll keep that unless somebody wants it.
Great.
my only comment about
The DRB is, we haven't gotten to the planning board yet, but there does seem to be a natural connection between the work that the DRB does and the work that the planning board does. So it might make sense for those to end up with the same person. So just to sort of keep that in mind when we get to the planning board.
Okay. I also think we can make a second pass through these.
At the end, we probably should just count them out to make sure one of us doesn't have 13 and one of us has 6 or something. We can do a final trade if there are obvious.
a comment about that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
Chris, to me, that
I should be keeping extremely careful notes about this process, but I see that you are. I just want to make sure that you are. So are you keeping track of these as we go?
I am. I will share them with Lisa. I'll share them with you too. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Next one is the Economic Development Committee. That was John.
I missed the dog park.
Oh, sorry. Claire.
I would be happy to take the dog park.
Okay.
Sounds good to me, yeah.
The EDC was John.
I'd be happy to take it if no one else is wanting it.
Okay. The Finance Committee was John. I would be happy to do that.
Excellent.
The Green Advisory Board, Jim, you're happy with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Surprised. The Health Insurance Trust, you're also happy with that?
Yeah, and I think
It's a steep learning curve. So why don't I keep at it? Maybe I'll eventually understand what they're doing.
Okay. The Historical Commission.
Historic District Commission, Dean.
Well, Fran and I actually had a discussion about those, and those have been mine, but I know Fran has served on at least the HDC.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to give one or both of those up.
And I would love to take them.
Take both?
Yes.
And you guys are both okay with that? Okay. The Kelly's Corner Steering Committee was John.
I have actually served in that committee in the past, so I think it'd be a normal progression that I would stay as liaison unless somebody else wants it.
I would love that.
Love that Dean took it?
Yes.
Okay. Just wondering which way you were
sorry.
going there. Land Stewardship, Dean, are you still happy with that?
Yep, that's joined at the hip with conservation.
And Magic MAPC was Joan.
Happy to continue on that.
Okay, great. The Minuteman School, Jim, are you still good with them?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The Open Space Committee, I've been doing that, and I'm happy to continue doing that, unless someone else has an interest. The Planning Board was Joan.
So, yeah, so here's, I would be interested.
Possibly in taking on the planning board, if the rest of the board thought that was appropriate. But again, I think maybe it only makes sense. I think it makes the most sense with the DRB as well. So I would also be happy if another person here wants to do both. I'm open to that too. So I think it's worth talking about.
Do they absolutely have to go together?
No, but often they end up discussing the same issue, within a week or two or a month of each other. And to have some overlapping connection would, it seems like that would be helpful.
Not
right now.
How are we ending up here? Jim, do you want to take the planning board, and Himajit, did you have designs on the planning board?
No, I'd be happy to pass that along to Jim if he'd like that.
Okay. So then maybe we can just back up for a second and do the design review board. Do we want to leave them split, or does that?
From my point of view, being liaison for the DRB for 2 years, it's somewhat similar issues that you discuss with planning, but they're not necessary to be combined. But Jim, if you'd like to do planning and DRB, be happy to concede that one to you, and I'll move off DRB.
Okay,
As long as I can, come asking you questions, because there's a lot of, knowledge there that I'd like to tap into.
Okay.
The Recreation Commission, I'm currently a liaison there, unless someone else has an interest. SATSAC, I suspect that we might fold SATSAC into TAC, but that's that's a future decision, and I'm happy to continue holding that. The Senior Tax Relief Aid Commission.
That's been my responsibility. That committee hasn't met in the last year because they've reached a point in their process
Where they don't. There's a really good, successful process for allowing senior tax relief, and really at this point we just need to get the word out more. So I'm willing to continue that. I think what I owe the board and the public is is to continue the process of getting the word out about tax relief that's available.
Okay. The TAC was Joan.
What is that? I didn't understand.
I'm sorry, that's TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee. Sorry.
I'm happy to take that on if no one else has an interest in it. But if anyone else does, happy to pass that along too.
Okay.
and I have some interest, but I think at this point I've just taken on planning.
DRB, so I think my dance card just got full, but I'd be happy to talk with you, Himajit, about TAC questions, because I have some interest and experience there.
David, can I ask a question? If Jim is putting things together that go together, shouldn't senior tax relief be the same as with the Board of Assessors?
That would be natural, yeah, that's a great point.
So take that.
I'd be happy.
Can I just point of order, can we clarify whether comments from the audience are allowed? Because I heard one allowed and one not. So it should just be uniform, I think, one way or the other. Thank
Yes, okay. We're not taking comments during this process. So the senior tax relief, Jim, you currently have that and you're good with that?
Yeah.
The VCC, Jim, you're good with that?
Sorry, which one?
VCC?
Yes, oh, yeah, yeah. That-
And water resources?
Yep.
Can I add something really fast? I personally have a huge interest in water issues, so I'm wondering if the numbers work out and like if you know you have many committees and I don't have enough assigned, then we can work that out. But yeah, would love to see that. So that's something we can work out if needed.
Right, and the image of that, if that does work out to help balance things.
I might try to either talk you into taking the Acton Water District, or again, we could just be communicating about water issues if those committees stay, if those assignments stay split.
Do we want to move RAC now?
Or leave it under Jim?
I'm happy to have him entertain it. It's just gotten started again, so I don't have a big momentum or backlog about what's going on there. So it would be fine to have a new actually knowledgeable person take it.
Great. And actually, if I could propose, so maybe I could, and if this is okay with you, Jim, if I take Acton Water District and RAC and kind of keep those two together, and then I give Transportation Advisory to you, that might work out in terms of numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That would be fine with me too.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
So Acton Water District goes to Himbija, and TAC moves to Jim. Okay. The sewer committee is really not an active committee at the moment. The library trustees, it doesn't show on this list, but that was Joan.
Happy to take that on as well.
Okay. Also missing from this list is the DEIC, which is me. And now moving on. Oh, I see that it's I see that the two things that are separate. They're listed as trustees. This page split was funny. And there's the West Acton Library to Himbija. Is that okay with you?
Sounds good.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Dean, I see 8 for you, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And I see 9 for me, if I'm not mistaken. And 8 for Himbija. And 11 for Jim.
Yeah.
But you had 11 before, Jim, just different ones now. And 9 for Fran. Are we happy with all those? Do you want me to just go through and read them to make sure that we're all set? Or
I've been making notes, so I'm...
is everybody confident with the list? Or you just want me to go through it? Okay. And so the only thing I see is that Jim is a little high, and Dean and Himbija are a little low, and so it would be all nines if you gave up two, we'd each have exactly 9 committees. If Jim gave one to Dean and one to Himija. But, we can also do that offline, right? We don't have to do them all tonight, but maybe that's something to think about. So Dean and Himija, if you guys see one in Jim's list that you want, or Jim, if you see one that you want to give up, that you can just bring it up at a future meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good. Initial look through, I've been interested in the health insurance trust. I've been doing a little bit of research on that. So if that's something that, is something that you're interested in giving up, would be happy to take that, but we can talk offline as well.
Do you want?
Definitely open to that. It's,
do you want to?
Delightfully technical, and you'd be able to just dive right into it.
Do you want to do that now?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so that's then 9 for Himija and 10 for Jim.
that's even enough for me. I think a couple of my assignments
Are very light. So I think it doesn't feel like, a lot more than the rest of you.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, hopefully during the process, we're going to be looking at
a study committee for Public Works building. And if that happens, I'd like to take that on, so.
Makes sense. Okay. We'll move on. Discuss virtual participation in town, various board and committee meetings. So our current situation is that before, just as the pandemic was ending, but before the legislature changed the rules, we allowed committee meetings to meet all virtual or all in person, but discouraged mixing. But state law now, as it's been fully back in place, does allow members to be remote under certain circumstances, like you have to have roll call votes. So I'm just, we should just discuss here what we think is appropriate for the various boards and committees to do going forward. Do we want to say that if, so I think the member part, where it is the way state law is, right? Members can be remote under the conditions described in the state law. And then we could allow committees to decide themselves if they wanted to allow remote participation or not. The remote participation has been really good for, having more people in the process. So any comments? Should we make that the policy? Jim?
I guess I have a question
for the manager, because it seems like, well, at least in our case, allowing both local and remote participation by residents is an extra, work for the IT department. And I didn't know if there was recommendations you had, John Mangiarotti, about how we manage this. Is it okay to allow any committee to have, remote participation, or do we need a controlled process about, getting committees to do that one at a time, or what?
So we've been operating and planning under the existing policy of the board, where any committee that wants to do a hybrid meeting like we're doing here tonight would have to have permission from the board. There are actually 2 committees that have asked for that permission. I would prefer that, at least initially, in the same way that we rolled out virtual meetings at the very beginning in April of last year, sort of one at a time, just to make sure that, like right now we have Matt Murphy, we have Matt Frost was there earlier, we have a whole team making sure this goes okay. And as the more times we do it, the less the less staffing we would need. But just for that initial rollout, I'd appreciate that we do it in the same way, so that if the board were to approve on a one-off basis, or to kind of open the door for example, the HDC and the planning board have asked for that permission from you tonight. And if we could just move forward in that same manner where other committees make that request, rather than just opening to everybody.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. So that boards that want to just continue with remote meetings as before, that would be okay without getting special board permission. Is that true? So if everyone's remote, that's okay.
Yeah, so the new changes.
State law extending it through May of 22 allow for that to happen as it did before. The challenge for us from a staff perspective is when you want to do both. So,
Thank you.
So we would then continue with our policy under this proposal, unless there's an exception on a case-by-case basis. And then there are a couple of people that have requested exceptions. We can talk about those in just a minute. Do you want to make a comment, Charlie?
Quick comment. Discussing this with a lot of people, I think having the Zoom option may attract more people to volunteer on the boards, because they can participate a few times and see if they're interested, rather than having to physically show up. So I think that's a good thing to give it a try.
Thank you. Matt Murphy, I just want to say that if there's someone has raised their hand remotely, could you just let me know?
Of course, Mr. Chair. There are none at this time.
Thank you. So we all okay with keeping the existing policy? And then the two we're talking about tonight, John, that have requested are the HDC and the planning board. And we should probably vote on that since we voted on the last one. So I would take a motion to allow the HDC and the planning board to have mixed remote and in-person meetings. Second? So Dean moved and Fran seconded. Jim, would you call the roll?
Oh, first time, okay.
See how it goes. Ms. Nagareti?
That was perfectly pronounced, and aye.
Ms. Arsenal?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. That's unanimous.
Okay. We'll move on to item 7. Discuss the incident at the town meeting. In case people don't know, I'm not going to try to quote this, but there was a member of the public at town meeting that made a comment that was derogatory towards our Chinese residents in town, and so much so that many people on the inside anyway booed and hissed, and the moderator started to shut her down, but then she finished her remarks, and so the moderator didn't have anything to shut down. I for one, am very sorry that our Chinese residents had to hear a comment like that, and it's just, I just don't know what to say. No one in our community should have to hear such remarks. Anybody else on the board like to make a comment? Jim?
I guess there were a couple lessons for me. One was I wished I'd had the presence of mind to say something like that at the meeting, so that the harm of hearing that could have been partially assuaged earlier on. the other, so, yeah, I wish I had been ready, and I wish the moderator had been ready with a statement like that. And I think it also behooves us to have some sort of, simple but clear statement, if we can find a way to come up with one easily.
I actually have a proposed simple, clear statement that goes over all of that at the end.
Yeah, to echo what both you and Jim have said, I think that, a lot of people were really hurt and frustrated by the lack of response and the lack of protocol with dealing with situations like this. Unfortunately, it's kind of the nature of our society. I can go into it as a sociologist, but I think that it's so important that we have guidelines and we hold ourselves accountable to addressing violations of the values that we strive and have sworn to uphold as part of being on the select board. And so I think that this entails exactly like having a protocol, making sure that we know how to respond in the most appropriate manner as soon as we hear these types of comments, and making sure that everyone is aware of how those policies or what those policies are and how they should be followed, and also releasing a statement and making sure that that statement is timely to make sure that we're really addressing it when people need to hear it the most.
Dean?
So, a couple of thoughts. It was certainly a disturbing statement, and I suppose the bright side is that it was so disturbing because it was so unusual. I've been attending town meeting for 40-odd years, and to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time there was this sort of an ethnic slur that was brought out at town meeting. So certainly I think that we should respond in some fashion, but I tend to think that it was sort of a one-off. And I'm not going to address the motivation of the issue or what their personal situation was, but I don't think that we should necessarily overreact to what was said. It's certainly abhorrent, but I don't think that it reflects the entire town. The other observation that I'd make is that town meeting is really under the control of the moderator, and I think the moderator did a pretty good job of jumping in on it. So I think, certainly would congratulate the moderator for doing a good job of keeping that under control and not allowing it to go much further. The individual jumped up on another and commented out of turn on a number of other issues along the way. So it was a bad situation that it was an ethnic slur, but there seemed to be deeper issues there. And lastly, as far as, how are we going to respond, and, I've read some notices that people have put together and ideas about, taking some firm action. And, it's a slippery slope when you start talking about that. At one point, on the one hand, you've got hate speech. On the other side of it, you've got free speech. So I think these things have to be balanced carefully before we try to establish some hard and fast policy. But just a couple of ideas.
Any more comments from the board?
Is it appropriate to read a letter that was sent to us at this point?
Yeah,
or-
you can go ahead and read that.
Okay. So this letter we received July 11th, and it's from Erica Chin, and it starts, "Dear Select Board and DEIC members, the last time I spoke up was last December after the blatant, hateful, and racist attack on members of our school committee. I've been equally appalled at multiple instances of swastikas and anti-Semitic graffiti in outrageous and vulgar assault on Jews and Jewish life. I am also concerned about members of our LGBTQIA community who fear bullying and persecution. At the June town meeting, I was horrified to hear the hateful words about Americans should live in Acton, not Chinese people taking over. No doubt you are as appalled as the rest of us. The point is, no excuse justifies racist or ethnic hate in any form. The reason simply does not matter. Racist or ethnic hate has contributed to at least one suicide attempt among school-age children in Acton. Once the words are out there, the damage is done. It is a personal issue for me. Over 40 members of my family and extended family are people of color, primarily Asian and also Black, including my husband, daughter, and amazing 14-month-old grandnephew. Others are Jewish. However, I am writing as a human with a heart, a brain, and a soul, to stand up for all people's rights to live, to be, to breathe. The ask is a simple one: zero tolerance, accountability, at a minimum with 24 hours of a racial or ethnic hate incident. If not on the spot, there should be a strong, direct, unequivocal statement, one that leaves no doubt that racist or ethnic hate in all its form, verbal or behavioral, is condemned and will not be tolerated. Appropriate consequences will ensue. That is the only way cultural change will happen, and it is already underway. It is never too late. Please make it a priority to develop protocols and known consequences to investigate and address racial or ethnic hate incidents. Realizing that individual situations may be nuanced, this work may already be in process. Meanwhile, please issue a strong statement now indicating there is zero tolerance for racial or ethnic hate, and those who perpetuate it will be held accountable. Thank you. All best, Erica Chin, Hild Road in Acton. I think that's powerful, and I agree with everything she's written.
Thank you. I'll now take comments from the public. Charlie?
I was at town meeting, and I also listened to the DEIC meeting last Thursday. And tonight also, nobody happened to mention what this woman's husband had to say, so I will play it for you.
My name is John Covert, and I stand here to ask you to please not consider the comments of my wife, regardless of how you think you might want to vote on this. My dear beloved wife, whom I met 52 years ago and married 48 years ago, this January was subject to an improper adjustment of her psychiatric medication, and she has lost her mind, and there was never the slightest racist bone in her body before January of this year. And I have to apologize for you and beg your forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Dean mentioned he's never heard such an incident in the many years that he's been going to town meetings. I think I must have started going to town meetings before he was old enough, because I've been going to town meetings well over 50 years. This incident never happened before, never. And to try to expand it into an indication of the town being racist is not just plain wrong, it is dangerous. This woman has a problem, and frankly, if you take some action based on what she said at town meeting, the ADA includes provisions for not discriminating against people with mental illness, mental disabilities. I would strongly suggest that you check with town council before you pass any motions setting up a procedure or punishment or whatever. What happened? The town moderator handled it very well. She treated this woman the same as anyone else subsequent to her comments. and the town meeting handled it really well. When she first made the comment, people were jumping up to the microphone. I was outside. As soon as her husband made his comments, people sat down because they realized this is not something to discuss further. The town moderator, Joanne Berry, again, deserves credit for handling the way she did. At the meeting last Thursday, the only subsequent discussion of this woman's mental problem is to somehow try to tie it to criminal acts that have occurred by people with mental disabilities in New York primarily. Homeless people, multiple offenders, have no resemblance to what happened here last town meeting. So please, don't make this into a problem. There is nothing for the Board of Selectmen to do, because this incident was not typical of anything that goes on in Acton. And the more we try to expand this, including comments about last December's Zoom bomb, which turned out to be the work of someone, juvenile male in Arizona, and nothing to do with Acton, that part is always left out somehow. We don't need any more division. Think very hard about what you're going to do.
Danny?
Danny, Factor 11, Davis Road. When are we ever going to learn? How many racist incidents can there be in this town before we stop calling them isolated and one-time events? I mean, come on. You talk about town meeting. It wasn't that long ago, forget about a comment, that there was a whole warrant item at town meeting to take away any public benefits from undocumented immigrants. There is a whole history of racist comments and actions at town committee, at town meeting, and at our committees as well. Do we have to start to plaster all the incidents on the walls of this room for us to remember them? How much can we be in denial about the problem of white supremacy in this town? There's something called active bystander, I think I have it right? Active bystander training. I need to take it myself. I need to learn more about it. And it has to do exactly with the situations of how we react to racist comments when they happen. And by the way, mental illness does not make you racist, by the way. I would love to hear a motion from someone on the Board of Selectmen that it be a requirement, just like Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry, we're the Select Board now, have to get used to that, just like Select Board members have to take an ethics training and have to be trained on open meeting law, that they should take the fairly short training that I believe has been offered twice within Acton recently, and is hopefully going to be offered again soon, on active bystander training, because you're our spokespeople. We're counting on all of you to speak out. And I need to do a better job, and we all need to do a better job. But let's not deny that we have a problem. Thank you.
Tara?
Hi, yes, thank you, Tara from West Acton. I echo what Ms. Chin's letter and Danny said, and I am sad that I heard this. Don't make this a problem. Well, the problem exists. If you don't take a strong position and you don't enact a zero tolerance policy that has steps and procedure and release strong statements immediately, and officials contact the community members, please reach out within 24 hours. It's not that hard. If we don't do that, then what we're doing is we're taking something that is a problem and making it worse. It's a symptom of a larger and deeper cancer that I've been here a long time, and I've been very close to marginalized communities and witnessed the most evil kind of abuse from not only the people that live here, but officials. And I don't want to go in and name names and everything else. I just want you to respond responsibly, immediately, and sensitively. Thank you.
Matt, are there any hands raised remotely?
There is, Mr. Chair. There was also a few hands that went up and down throughout the item, so I'll give those people some time if they want to put their hands back up. Our first hand will come from Leo Faulkner.
Go ahead, please. Yes.
All right. Leo Fochman, 18 Wright Terrace. Mr. Chair, if possible, I'd like Kimija to make a comment after I make a little statement. We were both inside. She was about a row or two in front of me, and the person that made that awful comment, I believe, was in the row in front of her. And while we're saying that the comment is what mattered the most, during that whole meeting, any item that came up, you can tell that she was having difficulties because she kept on saying, like, nay for everything. So I'd really like Himija's opinion of her comments prior to that, that showed that there was a little mental instability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Matt?
There are a couple, yes, Mr. Chair. Leah Ramachandran. I know I butchered that, and I am so sorry. Leela, you can do it.
Yeah, it's Leela. I didn't expect to make a comment tonight, but I'm pretty frustrated by previous comments from Dean and Charlie. Every time there is an incident of racism or discrimination, I hear a response that minimizes it. It's always a one-off or it doesn't represent the town, but the fact is that sentiments like that are shared frequently and often in less public forums than through a microphone at town meeting. I've heard more than a handful of similar comments targeting Indian and Asian residents. We have to focus on the impact of the words that were uttered instead of the resident who made the comment, because racist incidents are frequently explained away and it's getting old. Please make intentional progress. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there's someone logged in as the Community Housing Corporation. Would you like to hear that comment?
Sure.
All right, if you could unmute yourself and let us know who's speaking.
All right, this is Janet Adachi, and I apparently am still logged into the ACHC's Zoom account, which is embarrassing because I had to cancel the meeting because I was having trouble figuring out how to set up the Zoom meeting today. In any event, Janet Adachi, 2 Simon Hapgood Lane. I have a different take on this issue, but it's probably one that a number of the members of the board are not going to agree with. I happen to be Asian, not Chinese, Japanese American. Most people who know me know that. And I was inside for annual town meeting, sitting in the same row with the woman who made the comment under discussion, and also made a lot of other, what I would consider to be inappropriate remarks throughout the annual town meeting. And initially, a couple of us nearby tried to, I don't know, enlighten her as to how she had to go up to the microphone to make her comments because she was just speaking from the floor. And it was at some point after that that she made the comment about Asians in Acton. And I thought, oh, I wonder if my trying to intervene to educate her was offensive to her. I was very aware in watching her that she had issues, to put it diplomatically. And I just said, I am going to ignore her. I was hoping that at some point the moderator would perhaps correct her and kind of try to manage her interjecting things from her seat, but that didn't happen. And I guess maybe it was okay because it was very democratic, even though she was acting inappropriately. But the comment itself was offensive, but I also couldn't help but take it in context, given that I was sitting in the row with the woman and I could see that she wasn't really fully in control of what she was saying. Now, whether she was, when she takes her meds, is racist is something else. I think it is important for people to comment about the content, but I think you can't separate that comment, that incident, from the person who made it, because I have difficulty believing that she was speaking maliciously. And it's malicious racist comments that I am more concerned about. There have been incidents elsewhere in the country with Asians being attacked. What I find interesting is when the attacks are by people who are Black or African American, the press is kind of guarded about commenting about the assailants. And I think that it's because there's some discomfort about identifying somebody of another race, also marginalized, attacking somebody who is of Asian descent. I think there are people who are uncomfortable about that, especially if they are strong advocates for racial equity. But I would say that if the board wants to make a statement, just be judicious. Don't just sort of condemn racism generally and rely on that statement to justify saying that we have a real problem in Acton, because that incident was unusual. There definitely was a context, and if you ignore the context, then you kind of distort what the statement was really about. And it was not a person knowingly saying something racist. And I think it would be misleading to suggest that that was an incident of racism in our community, to the extent that that's what you want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Sallow is up next.
Hi, everyone. Corey Salo, 5 Alcott Street. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so also wasn't planning to speak, but given this is turning into a topic about mental health, I feel moved to speak. So just want to say a couple things. I could say a lot, but I'm going to just, for the racial justice side of things, I want to amplify what Leela said and what Hima just said and what Fran read. And I'm so sorry to hear this happen at town meeting. I wasn't aware until now. But regarding the mental health aspect of this, I know Leo asked Himaja to comment on this woman's mental health based on what she observed. And, you know, I will let Himaja respond however she wants. And I'm guessing she might already know this, but, and Leo, I appreciate you might just want more context or want more information, but I just want to say, I find that to be a really inappropriate position to put a select board member in. Himaja absolutely should not have to be commenting on a resident's mental health, and there's absolutely no way she could be doing that from just observing her in a meeting. So I just want to support Himaja if she so chooses to not respond to that request, because I think it's not fair or appropriate. I also think that it is really important that, and I have some expertise in this, so I think I can go out on a limb and say mental illness is not, or mental disability is not an excuse for racism. It could be a reason that somebody spoke something out loud that maybe they previously were able to keep under wraps. There could be explanations there, but that still absolutely does not make it okay. I don't care how mentally ill you are, it doesn't make it okay. And it doesn't make it any less hurtful to the people that heard it. So I'm seeing examples of what some people refer to as white exceptionalism when, and I've seen, Dean, I'm sorry, but I've seen a couple of examples from you of times over the year that you've said, you know, this is an isolated incident, or let's not turn this into a big deal. You guys aren't the ones turning it into a big deal. It already is a big deal. It's hurtful. And saying, you know, Acton is an exception to the rule. Acton isn't where racism occurs. We can't have that anymore. I don't know how many times we have to give examples and state the case that racism occurs here. It does. And so by addressing it, that's not what's making it a big deal. It's already there, whether you address it or not. So I wholeheartedly support Danny's suggestion and what Himija was talking about having policies in place to really give you guys the tools to respond to this without it feeling like a huge deal, because it's just what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kelly Stowe.
Hi, thank you. Kelly Stowe on Hayward Road. And listening to all these different comments, it's really interesting. I think there's a little bit of truth in what everyone is saying. I will just say that I'm a fairly new resident here. I moved here in 2020, and there is an undercurrent in this town regarding the Chinese community, and I heard it before I even moved here. From some people who live in the town, making comments about how many Chinese there are in the town and how it has affected, you know, the population at the school and things like that. So it exists. I would just like to verify what Leela said. It exists. I think it is a problem. I think that the incident at town meeting, I think that people who have said things about it would normally not say that. So the woman with the mental illness, she said things that other people are thinking in some way or another. It is a problem that needs to be acknowledged, in my opinion. So to just brush under the rug as an isolated incident, I don't think that's right. It's out there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, there is one more hand up from Sarah Coletti.
Actually, this is Michael Bialis from 80 Willow Street. I just wanted to say one of the basic tenets of the active bystanders training is that the most important thing is taking care of the victim. So the comments about the perpetrator are secondary to this. That the town really needs to take a strong position in order to defend the people who were victimized by this. And that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann?
I'm Ann Chang, 8 Billings Street. I've lived here since 1967. If anything,
that woman's comments did not surprise me. When someone loses their governors, which she had, obviously, and her husband gave her leave to say it because she was mentally, had mental problems. I have found through very painful experience, when people drink or lose their governors, they say such things all the time. But that's not the point for the Board of Selectmen. I think the point for the Board of Selectmen is, or the Select Board, whatever you want to call yourself, is what do you guys do, and where are your powers to do something positive so this kind of thing doesn't happen. Now, you may not think so. I thought that Joanne, the town moderator, who has control over the town meeting, handled the situation as best as could be done under the circumstances. I think that you guys don't have any power to do anything at town meeting other than if you want to pop up after something like that is said and say the Board of Selectmen have voted whatever it is that you voted, fine. A lot of the other incidences that were listed in the letter and what people have been talking about have happened in the schools, and it's the schools' purview to take care of the things that happen in the schools and not the Board of Selectmen. Yet the Board of Selectmen can support the schools in whatever way they want to without getting involved in the nitty-gritty of the situation. Is Acton a racist town? I would say that it's gotten better, believe it or not. You may not think so, but I think over the years that I've lived here, it has gotten better. But is there racism in town? Yes, there's definitely racism in town. And do people say things against Asians all the time? Yes, all the time. Do they say it against me? Yes. I've had it from people who you would not think would ever say such a thing. A couple of drinks and they're off to the races. So, but there's nothing you as a board can do about that. I mean, that's not that's not your charge. But if in fact something like that were to happen again, and you had a statement to make at that particular time, I think that would be appropriate. But not to paint everybody in town and every incident in town as something that you have to deal with and try to mitigate, because I don't think you can do it. I think you're fighting a losing battle in that sense. That's all.
Thank you. So yeah, I appreciate everyone's comments.
Mr. Chair, there's actually an additional comment from the internet audience, if you're willing to take that.
Okay.
Alyssa Nickel, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. This is Alyssa on School Street. I just wanted to speak to this idea of purview and authority. And I want to suggest that perhaps every single person that lives and works in the town of Acton has the purview and authority to speak out against derogatory and racist comments that are made. Just the example of the town meeting, I think that it would have been perfectly appropriate for any member of the select board or any member of town meeting to call a point of order and make a remark that those comments are not acceptable and will not be tolerated. That's all that needs to be done. But to suggest that the select board doesn't have purview and authority over creating a welcoming, inclusive environment, I have to 100% disagree with. And I hope that the select board members do as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, would it be okay if I said something as well?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So thank you to all those who shared their thoughts today. I would like to say that looking beyond this incident, it's very, very clear that there are incidences of racism in this town, both in public places and in private places, and neither should be tolerated. And I think that, if you want to look at this specific incident, we see here that, and this is, me speaking with a health background. I have the fullest sympathy for, whatever individuals are going through, but I think it doesn't diminish the hurt and the pain and the reoccurring trauma that keeps happening, especially with our people of color, especially with the people who live in this town, who are residents of this town, who contribute to this town, and who are constantly made to feel like they are not part of this town. I can speak about it from personal experience. Over the past few months, I have been the victim of racist attacks, and that has happened constantly. And so I can tell you from personal experience that it is an issue. I think that the most important thing that we need to do now is to have a protocol so that we can make sure that in the future this doesn't happen again. And this doesn't, and it may have taken this incident to kind of open our eyes about it. I remember sitting in that room and thinking to myself, I don't know how I would go about this, and kind of speaking to Danny's point about the importance of being an active bystander. I think that that's a responsibility that falls on us, not just as members of the select board, but as residents of this town. So I think that it's just so critical that we focus on that. And, everyone here was at town meeting. We all had the opportunity to speak up, and we didn't. And I think that's the most important thing to realize, is that there is a need for us to address these issues when they arise, and right now we're not doing that. Regardless of the context of the issue, I think it's important that we be prepared, especially as we move forward with a commitment to inclusivity. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to have us consider to do two things, consider doing two things tonight. The first is I have a really short little position that I'd like to have us consider adopting, and then I have a second thing. And the position is only 3 sentences. The Select Board values all Acton residents. Any type of hurtful speech or action targeting anyone for who they are is unacceptable here, including racism, anti-Semitism, ethnic slurs, homo or transphobia, ableism, etc. Respect for everyone is expected in all interactions in our community. Just a really simple statement. I would love if we would adopt that as a position. I'm happy to discuss it further or vote on it, whatever you guys would like to do with that. And then after that's done, I have a second thing I'd like us to consider. Dean.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the board adopt that statement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, actually, can you repeat the statement again?
Yes. The Select Board values all Acton residents. Any type of hurtful speech or action targeting anyone for who they are is unacceptable here, including racism, anti-Semitism, ethnic slurs, homo or transphobia, ableism, etc. Respect for everyone is expected in all interactions in our community. Any other comment? Ready to vote? Jim, would you call the roll?
Okay, I got my little sheet here to remember the order I like to call people. Ms. Nagaredi.
Aye.
Ms. Arsenal.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Mark.
Aye.
And I say aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. The second thing I would like us to consider is, we happen to be in a lull here between meetings, probably the longest time we have between select board meetings in the year, except maybe over New Year's, I don't know. But this is, it was a pretty long time. And so it took us, a really long time to get to this meeting to be able to discuss this situation. And just for everybody's history, it's kind of gone back and forth. And in the past, we've asked the town manager to let the board have, positions on policy, to have its own positions on policy. But I think it's, and so the town manager and the police chief and others have refrained from doing that. But I think it is important that we be able to respond quickly. And I think maybe we should, this has never been voted on or anything as far as I know. It's just a kind of a sentiment of the board that the manager has responded to. But maybe we should ask the manager that when an incident like this comes up, he should respond immediately without necessarily having to take a policy for the town. The policy is really a matter of the board to do. But a response to an incident, the town manager doesn't need a quorum of himself, or he already is a quorum of himself, so he can respond instantly. And John, I'm happy to have you respond if you're comfortable doing this. And I'd be interested to hear what other members of the board think. But I think that the delay here was a problem. And it's either we have to call an emergency meeting, which would have been problematic here because, well, first of all, we only had 4 members at the time. And so we were, the whole board was in flux. Anyway, I'm interested in comments, and like I said, John, I'm interested in your comments as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think the practice of speaking on behalf of the community
is something that I would be comfortable doing, but it also is something that I'd want to have a little bit an opportunity to learn more about this board's policy direction. In the past, the thing about issuing a statement is sometimes you can't do it soon enough, but sometimes you have to wait, depending on what the details are, to make sure there's enough available to make an appropriate statement. And if you look back at the last few times where the Board of Selectmen, I believe it was still called at the time, issued statements, in one case we called an emergency meeting, I believe the next day, and it was delivered, but I think it wasn't that hard to call an emergency meeting, so especially with virtual abilities. So I'm happy to try to do my best to speak and respond to incidents, but with the varying degrees to which incidents occur, and not having a lot of experience with this board other than the last 2.5 hours, I don't know that I'd be comfortable speaking on behalf of the board, depending on the situation.
Dean?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the situation that the manager finds himself in. I think it's probably be more appropriate that, if an incident like that occurs again, it's probably a matter of discussion with the chair and the manager, if time does not allow you to get the full board together. But I think, as the chief policymakers, we all have to own whatever gets said. And I don't think that we should delegate things inappropriately to the town manager, because it's a brand new board he's dealing with.
Jim, did you have your hand up? I didn't see.
Having the manager consult with the chair to decide on a course of action, I think would be a fine middle ground to make sure that the board's involved that way. And if the two of you think that calling an emergency meeting is appropriate, like it's a complex situation or it's an evolving situation, then that's what the chair gets to do, is to call emergency meetings. And if it's a routine, something happens that's happened before, we've already discussed this, we already know it's wrong and not acceptable, then a simple statement that's timely, I think has a lot of value. The other comment I had was that it seemed like tonight we might also want, if we can construct it or create a process for constructing it, just a simple statement about this particular incident. Might be of some comfort to those who were attacked.
Yeah, if you would like to draft and make a motion for that, that statement, I'll.
Another possibility, in addition to having John consult with the chair, John can also potentially draft a response, send it out to all of us, and we all respond to him on a one-on-one basis. If we, have concerns about a sentence or the tone or something like that. But I think, when an incident happens, an initial conversation with the chair makes sense, and then they can decide whether to call an whether it merits calling an emergency meeting or not, or whether the manager can draft a statement and either consult with the chair or maybe consult with the whole board. Excuse me. Does that make sense? Everybody agreeable for that? John?
First of all, I think what you just said makes sense. There's incidents that happen in our town buildings, like this one we just spoke about tonight. There's incidents that happen in New England. There's incidents that happen in the nation. And all of them have impacts on the community in one way or another. So that would be something I'd also be looking for guidance on, is which several of those instances, are we making statements, or is it just the ones that, when it happens here?
Any input from board members as to whether, countrywide incidents need an immediate response or, next meeting response, things like that? Dean?
Yeah, I think, as a select board, we're charged with what happens within the geographical bounds of the town of Acton. There are horrible incidents that happen every day in every corner of this country, and we can't spend all of our time. Maybe as individuals, you might want to do it, but I think as a board, chief executive officers for the town, I think we really need to focus, most importantly, on what happens right here. If, A, because there's too many incidents for us to comment on outside the boundaries of the town of Acton, and B, if you comment on everything, then you very quickly exhaust people. They hear it from us so many times that they're just not going to pay attention to us. I think it's really important. The point that people are making all along is, there are things that happen right here that we should concentrate on. And, if a situation happens here, we should comment on it. But if it happens outside the boundaries of the town, certainly as individuals, we can be concerned about it and make comments, but as a select board, we should stick to making our comments about what's really within our bailiwick.
To make one comment too, and I think the statements are great for the moment when an incident happens. I think that we, at this point, need to adopt some sort of zero tolerance policy, which includes all the victims, all of our, BIPOC, AAPI, and residents who are marginalized, and then find a way to educate with bystanding training or a townwide forum, but that doesn't help for the right now. But I think it's more than just a statement.
Sure. I mean, that sounds like it requires more thought. And if you want to bring that back at another time.
Goal-setting meeting.
Maybe, yeah. Yes, I mean, zero tolerance, and to me implies a consequence. I don't know if you implies a consequence, and what is that consequence, and for who, right?
I think as a town, we can't tolerate this, anymore.
Yes, it's just what happens then, right?
So I think even with a reporting system, a person working in town hall, a diversity officer designated just for this is such a great start.
Yeah, I completely agree on the incident reporting system. Nothing else from the board?
Yeah, sorry, just to add one quick thing. I think that in terms of our response and in terms of putting out statements, and I totally agree that we need to do our due diligence with looking at what is our policy moving forward and ensuring that we emphasize zero tolerance for any type of discrimination. I think in terms of issuing a statement, I think it can be a system of priorities. So when there's an incident that happens here in Acton, I think the mobilization of John talking to you, the chair, making sure that we have an emergency meeting happen when it needs to, I think that process has to happen really fast. I think that time is of the essence, especially because the longer we delay in making a statement, the more harm it does to the community being affected. But I think it's also important to address countrywide incidences that are also traumatic to our BIPOC community here in Acton and to other marginalized communities here in our town. So, but I think that in terms of there being an instant mobilization of response, maybe it can wait a few hours or it can wait a day, but I think that, especially when, and I think this is the important thing about being plugged into the community and really hearing, if there are concerns and if we do see, a certain group, feel really traumatized. And even if they aren't, I think that it is our responsibility to address it. And so that's my personal belief that, that type of action is absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Dean?
So I think, Fran, David asked you the question, what are the consequences going to be? And we haven't really discussed that yet. Just taking this most recent incident as an example, the individual made these comments. Everybody agrees that they're inappropriate and abhorrent. But what would be the consequence when you say zero tolerance? Does that mean, somebody's attending town meeting? Does that mean that this person is going to be deprived of the right to attend town meeting in the future? Or what happens? So I think it's important that we not be paper tigers on this. Let us know what sort of responses you think are appropriate, and then obviously, depending upon what you have in mind, those would have to be reviewed by town council. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't have an answer tonight, and I would like to do more research and trying to come up with some sort of policy, and it's not I don't have an answer tonight.
I mean, one of the things it was a learning process for me in the past is that definitely the most important thing is sympathy and interaction with those who are affected by the action, right? That's first, and other things second. I'll now take comments from the public again. Charlie? Yes, please.
I have to ask you, and Dean has started down this path, what does "this will not be tolerated" mean? Are these empty words? Everybody here is against racism, against discrimination, against so on and so forth. That's a given. That's a given. Now, the dog agrees. Really, and I am repeating what Dino said somewhat, each time you react to this, it diminishes what the significance of the Board of Selectmen, school committee, whoever, publishes a statement. Each time it becomes routine, it becomes irrelevant. So unless you have something very specific in mind as to what the consequences are, saying this will not be tolerated, those are empty words. I tend to be blunt, as you may have noticed. I'll say it for my own reasons, it's intended to do a good thing, not to diminish what you're thinking, but to make it effective. Calling an emergency meeting of the board is, yeah, okay, that makes the news once, twice, three times. After a while, saying, don't the Board of Selectmen have better things to do? Because I have to repeat, you don't have to prove that everybody's against racism. That's a given. Let's assume that people in this town are not racist. Let's not assume that they are. That's one of my biggest disagreements with some of my friends. But I've lived here a long time. This community has become very diverse without laws, lawn signs, regulations, whatever. It just happened because it is a welcoming community. Now, everybody will run into a problem here and there. Everybody has. It depends what you make of it. And I am afraid that we're making some big divisive thing out of things that just happen. And this incident at town meeting is a perfect example. I noticed that the husband's statements seems to evaporate. He said very clearly his wife of 48 years is mentally ill. Now, that's quite a statement for somebody to say at town meeting. He apologized. He begged forgiveness. What else do you want him to do? Poor man has this problem already. There was not a single statement of sympathy at the DEIC meeting. People went immediately into, well, people with mental disabilities have committed crimes against ethnically Asians. That happened in New York has nothing to do with what happened in Acton. So please, please think about what the significance of what you're going to do may be before you just knee-jerk react and say, we're against, this is a bad thing, should not have happened. Those are empty words.
Thank you. Tara?
So I have an answer relative to what it means to not tolerate. And it's the reverse. It's to what means to tolerate. And when you tolerate these incidents, it means you do nothing. So I disagree with Charlie on that account and on that count. And I also feel like if someone goes to Maynard and gets into a car accident and comes back and needs nursing care, are we going to say, oh, well, we're really sorry it happened in Maynard, we're not going to care for you? These folks are impacted. They're impacted when a rabbi gets stabbed in Brighton. They're impacted here. It's not the intent. It doesn't matter where it happened. It means our people are impacted, and we have the opportunity to care for them for something that doesn't even cost any money, guys. So George Floyd, we made a statement, okay? So maybe it doesn't have to be every time somebody throws their finger out the window and says something to us hanging around Kylie's corner. But when it's impacting enough people that a leader of the community reaches out and asks for help, when there's enough in the news where there's people talking and there's all stuff all over Facebook, that's an indication that something needs to be done. It's the impact, and it's comfort. The comfort that we care enough to say something. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make one clarification. Oh, please, Jim, go ahead.
Well, when you're ready.
No, please go.
A simple statement. Be happy to screen share it when you think the time is
Okay,
right.
I'll come back to you for the third thing for this item. So
I just wanted to say two things. One is that, the DEIC, what happened at the last DEIC meeting was mentioned, and when they talked about mental illness in other places, it was meant as it's not an excuse for racism, right? And it happens other places. It's not an excuse for it, not anything else. And making things a big deal is important. It shows the people who are affected by the things that they matter, right? That when we don't ignore a statement made about our Chinese community, our Chinese friends and neighbors, and we discuss it. It shows them that they matter to us. And second, it shows those that would say these things that they're not acceptable here. So those two things are really important, and it's important to make a big deal about it every time until people feel so uncomfortable about saying them here that they just don't. They can think what they want. They can't say what they want. not a public forum. I just, before we go to Jim's statement, I just want to kind of throw something out here and just get nods from the board because this is what I heard before these comments. When an incident happens, the town manager can contact the chair and they can make an assessment for how proportional the response needs to be. You know, if it's a big national issue, maybe, but it would have to reach a much higher level for a national issue than an Acton issue, right? And an Acton issue, so they would make a decision as to what the response would be. If the response was an emergency meeting, we would call one. If the response was that the manager would make a statement, then he can run that statement by the members of the board just to make sure that everybody gives it a thumbs up or says you need to be more clear in the second sentence or whatever you want to say. Does that sound reasonable? So if it's a big deal, we'll call an emergency meeting. If it's something that needs an immediate response, the town manager can draft a response and pass it by us. And the determination of how big a deal it is done between the town manager and the chair. All that sound good? Okay, Jim, please, to your motion.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Mr. Chair, before Mr. Snyder shares his screen, there is an additional public comment from the virtual audience.
Matt. What we're going to do here, so I'm going to move on. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. This is visible then?
Make the font a little bigger.
Read it out loud.
Okay.
An unacceptable statement targeting our Chinese American neighbors was made at our recent town meeting. The board affirms that our civic spaces do not have room for these types of racially targeted statements, and we apologize for the harm done to our Chinese community.
Comments from the board?
I guess I would move that we adopt this statement or some variant that the board finds better.
Actually, why don't you just move to adopt that statement? We'll get a second and then we'll discuss it.
Thank you. That's much better.
Are you moving that?
Yes.
And is there a second here?
I'll second that.
Okay. We can now discuss it. If someone wants to propose a change and Jim accepts it and then Dean is seconded.
Accepts it, we can make a change. Any comments from the board? Go ahead, Dean.
So I think it's a good statement, and I think the only issue I have is when we talk about, and we apologize for the harm done to our Chinese community. Well, as the select board, we didn't commit this harm. I think we certainly should feel in sympathy with the Chinese community and in solidarity with them, but since we did not commit the act, I don't think we should have to apologize for it. But I do think that we should express our support and solidarity with the Chinese community.
Okay, other comments?
I do think we have to apologize because we didn't speak up sooner. But I do like the wording of it. I was wondering where we say affirm that our civic spaces do not have room for these types of racially targeted statements. I wonder if we can make it more explicit and say that the board affirms that we do not accept or tolerate these types of racially targeted statements. Something a little bit more stronger and concrete around that.
Okay, we'll come back and work in the wording in just a minute. Any other comments from the board? And before Jim makes any changes, what about the support and solidarity or apologize? What do people think? And
solidarity. But I think it's nice to apologize as well.
It never hurts to apologize.
No.
So, Jim, do you want to try to work in that support? Should Jim try to work in these two things, and then we'll take those as friendly amendments, and then, is that okay? Those are good. Jim, you just want to try to work those in?
Sure, I had another change to suggest.
Oh,
Also, which
okay,
is
please go ahead.
reading it, I think there's a risk that the phrase "our Chinese community" could be seen as paternalistic, and I probably better as the Chinese community or the Acton Chinese community.
I like our Chinese friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
And I don't mind the R because they're our friends and neighbors.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I could see that with our is okay if it's friends and neighbors. Yeah, I agree.
Are people okay with the friends and neighbors thing? Okay, Jim, maybe you can, I think I've got nods here for incorporating all those things.
Maybe you can do that while I take a public comment. Is that okay? Tara, please.
Thank you. I like the idea of apologizing, and I would say on behalf of the town. I also would make its statement plural, because I think there were many statements, not just one. And then about the word room, I figure like if the room is really big, then we'll be tolerant of those statements. So it says we do not have room.
I think we already changed it.
You already changed it. Okay, thank you.
Matt, are there any online comments now?
There are none at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
While Jim's editing, anybody have a joke or anything they want to tell?
Be happy to share my screen again with. Okay. Perhaps I should read it out loud. An unacceptable statement targeting our Chinese American neighbors was made at our recent town meeting. The board affirms that we do not accept or tolerate these types of racially targeted statements in our civic spaces. We express our support and solidarity, and we apologize on behalf of the town for the harm done to our Chinese friends and neighbors.
People like that? Okay, Jim, will you take that as a friendly amendment, all those changes?
Absolutely.
And Dean, will you take yours for a second?
Yes.
Okay, any final comments? Jim, can you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I say aye, so it's unanimous.
And I say aye as well.
You didn't call Himija. But she said aye anyway, even though you didn't call on her.
So what was the vote for Himija?
Aye.
Great, okay. Then we are once again clear that we are unanimous.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, establish a date and process for the annual goal-setting workshop. Please, Dean, go ahead.
In the interregnum, before we reestablished the board, we kicked around a couple of times possible dates. The manager's not here, but I think we were looking at June 21, July 21, at 6.
The Chiefs room.
Chiefs conference room.
Not just yet, thank you. So I'd like to say that, you know, understanding what Mr. Thacker said earlier, however, the goal-setting meeting is usually a working meeting. It's not when we take input. We discuss tens of goals, and getting input on the goals, we would never be able to vote on them. And besides that, it's important, at least for me, for us to have a time where we can work. There are very, you know, few meetings where we have because of OML and everything else, right? We don't have a chance to have a dialogue, and so that's very important to me. And I think that you know, it's important. Finally, too, since we are going to be discussing tens of things, that if anybody has a comment, that they email it in and to support that their thing be on the goal list or not. You know, I think, you know, it's an open meeting. People are welcome to attend, but we normally don't take any public comment at that meeting. And I would like to continue that practice. Jim, was that your hand up? Yes, please.
Yes, but I just want to make sure you were finished speaking before I got my thoughts together. Are you done?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the thought I had was that now that we understand just how beautifully seriously John Mangiarotti takes our goal setting process, and I don't mean that lightly. I mean, it's like it's been an amazing change over the years, the transition to John and how seriously he takes these goals. I thought it might be appropriate to have one meeting or one part of a meeting where John reports on the state of the current goals. And at that same meeting, we accept public comment on you know, possible goals going forward. And then, as you said, I think it's incredibly valuable to have time for those of us on the board to really be able to talk with each other. So to have a meeting that's everyone listens in and we talk after having gotten that input both from the town manager and from the public. So that'd be my recommendation.
Sorry, just a comment on that. We would have
an extra meeting before, right? Which means we wouldn't get the goals done until August, and we usually have them done before the fiscal year. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You asked for a meeting where kind of a retrospective on last year's goals, and maybe take public comment at that meeting, and then the working meeting. So that's 2 meetings, plus we have one more regular meeting scheduled this month. So we wouldn't get to the goal-setting meeting until August, which I think it's already late. That's just a concern. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but maybe in another year, a non-pandemic year, that would be easier to do, just my 2 cents. Anybody else have, Dean?
So I agree with you, David. I think during all of our campaigns, we've certainly had lots of time to get input from the public. And I think, with this discussion today, if other members of the public have ideas, they should reduce them to writing and send them forward to us. We've already received some. I've gotten some. I'm sure everybody else has. As far as the timing goes and not dragging this thing out, we're essentially going to be in August. The town manager starts really working on his budget in September. And that's how he needs to have our goals early on so that he can work with his staff and see if there's any way that some of our goals can be implemented. The short-term goals we try to implement within this year with the existing resources, and long-term goals are things he's got to work on for his budget in forthcoming years. So I agree with Dave on this, that in a normal year, when we're done with town meeting in April, and we can have our goal-setting meeting later on in April or early May, we've got enough time to do this. But I think this year, we're better off just to get a quick process done, and certainly invite everyone to send in their comments in advance. And I certainly have no problem with the idea of the town manager giving us a brief 15-minute update, kind of tick through the list that he's been working on this year. I think we all probably have seen the results of what he's done. And we'd like to know what challenges he has, but I think we're better off to do it quicker rather than in more prolonged fashion.
Other comments?
So I'm all for the goal-setting meeting in its form like you've had it, but it is a public meeting, so the public can come. And there is no public comment at the meeting.
That's correct. So the chief's room is not a big room?
Yeah.
And usually just a small number of people come?
Right.
So there's chairs around the edge, at least
Yeah,
how it's been set up previously? And
Okay. I'm all for sooner rather than later.
Another reason for sooner, if some of the goals require a fall town meeting,
Yeah.
we'd need to begin to plan for those.
Sounds good.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd actually like to hear your perspectives, John, on the logistics. Like, for example, if we did go with Jim's idea and we had 2 separate meetings, what would that look like in terms of you collecting the resources and the information you need to then, inform the fiscal budget and kind of lead the staff efforts around that? What are your thoughts around the feasibility of, having 2 meetings or having public commenting at a meeting?
Well, in terms of recapping the goals from the prior year or the prior 2 years, which really are still being worked on, I can run through that pretty quickly. If you ask me to prepare a long memo and report, it might take a while, but I could rattle off where we are and all those things in a relatively short period of time. In terms of public comment during the goal setting meeting, that's entirely a board discussion. I do know that in the past, in my experience in other towns, goal setting is done as a workshop, and workshops typically don't have public involvement, and it's because it's the board doing its work. Where every meeting is a public meeting, that is one in particular where it's almost like a retreat, but they don't really go anywhere. They just go in a room and try to really get together on what you want to do this year. And my role in that is to support you in any ways that I can, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to provide any input that I have in that process, but it's really the board and how each member wants to, because it's a voting process, right? So each of you may have things that are highest priority for you, but in the end, it ends up being 10 to 12 things that there's the most votes for out of all of you to move forward on. So if you do it in one night or if you do it in 2 nights, it doesn't really matter to me. It just would take it that much further into the season to even start thinking about how to accomplish them.
Do you have a quick comment, Tara?
So for me, and I've been through the process before 3 times and watched it many times, that there's a moment when after all of the select board members have given their ideas and have kind of jostled them around and combined them, and there's a wonderful time when I think that it would be great to just 1-minute comments from the public, because now we know what the actual options are, as opposed to just being out here and sending in our ideas with any idea what other people are sending in. So once we see them coalesced is a time when I would like very much to have input. Not at the beginning, but just at that moment after you've coalesced them into just before you vote. Thank you. To have it in the bigger room instead of the crushed-in room, given the pandemic. There's 200 people still getting COVID every day, and so in Massachusetts alone. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't see how the public comment works without going in whole hog, right? I mean, either we spend all night with public comment or we don't, right? There is no, because this is, but as Dean said, especially you guys, you've just spent the last months campaigning and talking with people about what their interests are in the town. You're very up on what people want. People talk to us all the time, I think we know the thing. And also, this meeting is really for us to ask the town manager what we want him to do, right? This is, in fact, it's mentioned in the town manager's contract, right? That we will prepare goals for him before the beginning of the fiscal year, right? We're already 2 weeks beyond the beginning of the fiscal year, right? So, and I think it's very important that we move ahead with that. Go ahead. I don't like taking public comment one at a time, right? I'm going to start having rules that people either come up and get in line for public comment or don't. But go ahead, please.
And I apologize. We're dealing with this new table here. And thanks for the chairs, by the way, on behalf of many in the community. Since I was the person who made the original comment, I want to say that I am sympathetic to the time schedule issues, and also, we definitely want to give the time for the board to deliberate. If the board feels that that this is too late to be considering this, I understand that. There's a bit of a logistical problem that this is the first time that this board is going to be is meeting and could consider this for this board. But if in fact the consensus in the board is that the logistical issues are too much, I would, and I think David, hinted at it, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, that this is something that could be considered for the following year. Because what I don't think we should do, and I kind of hear this from Jim also, is discount the effect that having citizens come at some session, whenever it is, could be a month before the goal-setting session, and to, in a heartfelt way that can't be done in writing, to plead to the board about what the goals of our town should be for a year. What an exemplary session to have. We talk about people being short-sighted, all the time. What a wonderful thing to have members of our town come and engage in a little bit of longer-term planning and talk about what their vision of Acton can be for the year. I really think that would be a valuable session, and if logistically it can't be done this year, let's make that a goal maybe for June of 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a fine idea. Unfortunately, we're kind of pandemic squished, right? We would normally new boards are formed traditionally in April, so we have time before the fiscal year starts. So, but thank you very much. So the proposed schedule is that we would do this in the chief's room of the public safety facility a week from Wednesday, the 21st of July, and then we actually have a regular meeting the 26th of July. Is that okay with people? Or does someone want to make another proposal?
I just want to look at my schedule just a second, but I think it should be fine.
You can put your schedule up on the screen if you'd like.
I promise you don't want to see that. Um, 21st of July. Yeah, that's fine.
And John, am I correct that we have a meeting on the 26th?
It was envisioned as a goal setting, but if we do it on the 21st, we may not need the second. And there's a meeting on August 2nd, which is just a week later, already on the calendar.
Okay, so I'll leave that to you as to whether we need the meeting on the 26th or not.
Okay.
The 21st should work well for me, although I might be in Seattle to take care of my sister then. I don't know if there's like a remote way I could participate if that's the case.
In the goal setting?
Yeah, the goal setting.
Yes.
Yeah, we could do that, although it would be better for you if you were here. So, when do you know? I'm sorry, put you on the spot. When would you be back? Do you know?
I'll be back on the 25th. So I was planning if there was a meeting on the 26th to be back for that.
Would that be okay for the goal-setting meeting? And for members of the board and the 26th. So, I mean, I think it's important that Himija be here in person if that's possible.
I won't be here, but Mark can cover me.
Actually, that would be hard too. Are you gone that whole week? Or is there time during the week of the 26th, another day?
I don't know. I'll make it work.
You would probably have to be here. So, I mean, this is something we could also I don't want to put you on the spot here, John. If we could try to decide offline and propose to members of the board and just and get everybody's concurrence. I mean, in worst case, we could meet on the 2nd for the goal-setting meeting, and have a meeting in the interim for just regular business that you might not need to be here for. Right, I think that would be, if we have a meeting on the 26th, just a regular meeting, and Mark will be here, can be here for that, and then, both you and him should be here for the goal-setting meeting.
Okay, yeah, we can confirm that.
So let's tentatively plan on that. If nobody objects, and we'll get back to everybody on the board with the exact schedule. Item 9, request to raise the flag to commemorate India's Independence Day on Sunday, August 1st. Yes, we all received this, and we allowed them last year to do this, and we came up with Dean actually came up with a pretty simple set of requirements for people wanting to put up a national flag. And I'm just remembering these off the top of my head, that it can be there for one day, is that right? And there was another requirement. I'm forgetting.
Takes the place of the state flag.
Right. And so it was a very nice ceremony last year. I think, my opinion is this is fine. Anybody else want to weigh in on? Someone want to make a motion to allow flag raising, Indian flag raising?
I move the motion to have the Indian flag raising on August 1st to commemorate India's Independence Day.
Is there a second?
I happily second.
Okay, great. Jim, any more discussion? Okay. Jim, please go ahead.
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
I say aye, so it's unanimous.
Mr. Chair, there's also a proclamation that the board voted last year, and we received another one very similar to that today. If the board would consider approving that, I believe it's the same as last year with just the updated dates.
That's this proclamation. Oh, or is it?
Yeah.
That's it. Do people want me to read the proclamation? Okay. Whereas India is the largest free democracy country in the world, home of nearly a fifth of the world's population with exceptional beauty and rich cultural heritage, and whereas the Indian independence movement was led by patriots including Mahatma Gandhi, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Deshbandhu Das, Jawaharlal Nehru, I just know him as Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Lala Lajpat Rai, Lokmanya Tilak.
If you need any help with the names, I can help. I got you. Mahatma Gandhi, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Deshbandhu Das, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Lala Lajpat Rai, Lokmanya Tilak, Bhagat Singh, Maulana Asad, Raja Gopalachari, and Sardar Patel. And if I got anything wrong, please let me know.
And whereas on August 15th, 1947, India regained independence from 200 years of repressive British occupation with civil disobedience and nonviolent protest, that movement became a new weapon to fight against inequality and injustice in the world. And whereas the Constituent Assembly of India created the most democratic institution of its own, including inspirations from the American Constitution, and whereas a youthful country on the verge of its 75th Independence Day celebration, modern India has shown an unsurpassed growth in education, health, agriculture, and technology since independence. And whereas India's Independence Day is celebrated by almost 1.4 billion people across the country with flag hoisting ceremonies, kite flying, and parades. And whereas India is the largest diaspora in the world, and over 36 million of Indian origin live in other countries, with over 4 million people of Indian origin living in the United States, and over 100,000 in Massachusetts, and hundreds in Needham, who contribute greatly to the social, economic, and civic health of our nation and our community. We're at... Okay. I was wondering. There are a lot of people in Needham, too. There are hundreds in Acton who contribute greatly to the social, economic, and civic health of our nation and our community. And whereas India is a composite civilization, an ancient nation extraordinarily unique as a cultural mosaic of people embracing a prodigious diversity of ethnic groups, religious languages, religions, languages, customs, traditions, clothing, gastronomy, climate conditions, and natural resources, and yet presenting an underlying unity. Now therefore, the Select Board of the Town of Acton does hereby proclaim on August 15th, 2021 to be India Day and encourages all residents of the Indian community to celebrate the 75th Independence Day issued this first day of August 2021. With the edit of changing Needham to Acton, I would take a motion to make this proclamation.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, and is there a second?
I second
Okay, great.
Jim's.
I assume, is there any discussion? No discussion. Jim, please call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Ready?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so it's unanimous.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
At the event last year, we ended up sending a delegation of a couple of the select board members to make presentations and speeches and what have you. So I think it might be appropriate for you to ask for volunteers or appoint folks to do that.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Thank you. Unfortunately, I will be out of town that day, but would any members of the board like to be present at the and be the delegation for the flag raising, Indian flag raising?
It would be my honor if that's okay.
I'd be happy to assist.
Okay. Good, great. And last year, one of us actually hoisted the flag, so you guys can decide among the two of you who should hoist the flag. The next thing is the home rule petition from Article 14 of town meeting.
Yes, so this is town meeting authorized the board to petition the general court and related to enforcing local regulations restricting new fossil fuel infrastructure and certain construction. And this, we're asking the board to make a motion to formally send this to the general court. We included a motion for you to consider in the packet. And I can read it if it's not at anybody's disposal.
Yes, please go ahead since you have the.
So entertain a motion that the board requests the general court adopt a special legislation on behalf of the town in accordance with and in the form approved by Article 14 of the annual town meeting concerning building with clean energy to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure.
Jim, would you like to move that?
Well, actually, I had a concern with the language, but I could propose that in the form of an amendment.
Oh, no,
I'd be happy to
actually,
move that for.
Mention your change now so we don't have to amend it, because that's a vote.
Right. This would not have to be done by special legislation. If there was general legislation that allowed cities and towns to, regulate fossil fuel infrastructure, that would also be a fine route forward. So unlike other home rule petitions, we're actually working on this with, there are a number of other cities and towns that have very similar bylaws with very similar home rule petitions, and a fine outcome would be, a single act of legislation that would enable all these towns, indeed all the towns in Massachusetts, to opt into, being able to opt into, regulating fossil fuel infrastructure.
John, do you think it would be okay to say special or general legislation? Does that satisfy?
That doesn't sound like it's inconsistent with the article that town meeting approved. So
He said it
What
doesn't.
if you just say legislation, then you don't have to specify what kind?
Is that okay?
Yeah, just legislation. Yeah, that'd be.
Okay, so Jim, will you make that motion, changing the word?
word special to nothing.
Yes, I would happily move exactly what John said, which is with the removal of the word special.
Okay.
Is there a
Is there
second?
a second?
Second.
Is there any
Is there any
discussion?
discussion?
This is just affirming what town meeting did. Jim, please call the roll.
Yes. Ms. Navarrete?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenal?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
I say aye. Another unanimous.
Great. Item 11, the open meeting law complaint. Dean, I think you were prepared for this. Do you want to take this one? I think you
Got the,
right. Council recommendations beforehand.
so, just to update the board, Mr. Stephen Ballard of Boxborough filed an open meeting law complaint, which was received on July 6, 2021. Mr. Ballard alleges that the board violated the open meeting law on June 7th, 2021 by approving revised minutes for meetings on April 5th, April 12th, April 26th, and May 3rd that are still inaccurate. Mr. Ballard also alleges that the board failed to describe or list documents used in the April 26th and May 3rd meeting, specifically a petition and a DEIC statement. Town Manager's Office, in consultation with Council, has reviewed the revised minutes from April 5th, April 12th, and April 26th and believes them to be accurate. The revised minutes from May 3rd meeting should have listed the DEIC statement in its list of documents and exhibits used during the meeting. I think the board should revise the May 3rd meeting to include that missing document. I'm prepared to provide a motion. I move to request that at least Tom will revise the amended minutes of the board's May 3rd meeting to include the DEIC statement in the list of documents used during the meeting. And that would require a vote from the board. And a second.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any comments? Jim?
Is there going to be a separate motion? Motion to delegate the formal response to this complaint?
A separate motion for that.
So I want to say that, in the original complaint, the petition was mentioned in the revised minutes because I asked to have it inserted in that inserted in there. And the DEIC statement, I don't really object to this motion, but I'm not sure it was ever used as a document. A member of the DEIC read it during the comment period. But I don't object to this in any case, just to be, doubly careful, I guess. Any other comment? Jim, please call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Navarrete?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenal?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I say aye as well, so unanimous.
And
Mr.
second.
Chair, I'd like to offer a second motion. I move to request that Town Council and the Town Manager otherwise respond to Mr. Ballard's open meeting law complaint by informing him and the Attorney General's office that the board reviewed the complaint, has voted to revise the May 3rd minutes to include the DEIC statement in the list of documents and exhibits used, and believes that the other minutes properly follow the open meeting law and will take no action on those. Waiting for a second on that.
I second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll ask Jim to call the roll.
Mr. Chair, there is actually public comment, if you're willing to take it.
Yes, I'll take it, Matt. Thank you.
First, we're going to hear from Margot Law. Margot, you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Matt. Margot Law, 50 Flint Road. As it relates to the minutes of the 4 select board meetings from April 6th to May 3rd, the most recent revision of the meeting minutes still bears no resemblance to what actually transpired in those 4 meetings. I continue to be haunted by hearing Mr. Benson's shocking accusations against local leaders with no reference to any factual basis for those accusations, and his comment about Senator Jamie Eldridge, and the lack of anything resembling an apology. Mr. Benson was asked several times for actual examples to support his claims, and none were given. The language used in the minutes still goes so far as to suggest that these citizens and Senator Eldridge actually did something wrong and were justly criticized by Benson. This must be remedied. As a longtime resident, it's important to me that our town sets an example of good governance, starting with transparency, which has all but disappeared from the national dialogue, and our select board must set this tone. I hope you will quickly create a new draft of the meeting minutes that, when read by someone who did not attend the meetings, accurately reflects the nature and the content of what was said. Another simple way in which we can start this return to trust is to recognize that it matters who drafts the minutes and to whom that person reports. It cannot be a person who reports to the board, and that person should receive training and be required to have transcription skills. Thank you for your attention.
And there's an additional comment from Melissa Nickel.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Alyssa Nickel from School Street. I just want to echo Margot's sentiments that she quoted town council's advice that someone who had not attended the meeting would be able to determine what went on. I also want to share with you from Attorney General Maura Healey's letter to all Massachusetts residents regarding the open meeting law. One single sentence that describes the intent of the open meeting law. The open meeting law requires that most meetings of public bodies be held in public, and it establishes rules that public bodies must follow in the creation and maintenance of records relating to those meetings. So we have 2 important goals of the open meeting law. One is that open meetings happen in public for transparency. The other very important goal that I think is being missed here is that these records of those 4 meetings are not accurate. Mr. Ballard, I know, doesn't live in Acton. I know that all of you are aware that he has filed an inordinate number of complaints, but I don't believe that that's a reason to ignore this one. I think it's legitimate. I think it's valid. I think that every Acton resident and all people who serve on boards and committees, volunteers and elected officials should be concerned with this. And I would ask for the current clerk to review those videos and revise the minutes so that they accurately reflect the conversations that took place. Normally, when I read select board meeting minutes, the comments that are made during citizens' concerns that take between 1 and 2 minutes, each one of them gets a sentence summary of the intent and tone of whatever the speaker is bringing to the attention of the board. The conversations in those meetings took an hour or more, and I think that the revised minutes, as has been said by Mr. Ballard and Margot just now, are not an accurate representation. Thank you.
Other comments, Matt?
There are no more at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So I'm sensitive to
the comments that say the minutes are not historically accurate. And I was wondering if we maybe should go ahead and just approve this change, and then maybe Jim as you as current clerk and me as old clerk could get together and review the meetings once more for historical accuracy. And if we wanted to make amendments, we could do that at a future meeting. Is that okay with you?
I want to meet with you anyway to, learn the secrets of clerkdom. So I'd be happy to review minutes with you and transcriptions and, even that horrible video itself.
So if I don't think anybody can make
For comments, and if it's okay with everybody, we could go ahead and pass this motion, resolving the OML complaint, and then, Jim and I can get together and see if there's any further changes needed.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one quick thing. I think that this sounds like a good plan. And if there is any content, and there is going to be content that you write down that might be really sensitive and really hurtful to some people who are reading it, I think putting a trigger warning at the beginning might be helpful to just kind of warn people and to give them the space they need as they kind of go through those minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment, I'll ask Jim to call the roll.
Can you remind, sadly, I know I have recently called the roll on something, and I want to make sure.
This is the second motion made in the OML, allowing the manager and council to respond to Mr. Ballard and the AG.
Got it. Yes, happy to call the roll about that. And just as a reminder, my brain tends to turn to mush around now, so I appreciate your willingness to help remind me what we're actually talking about. Ms. Navarrete?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so it's unanimous.
Item 12, discuss the Regional Housing Services Office amended agreement.
Thank you. This is a very successful collaboration that we're part of with many of our neighbors. Liz Rust, who is the director of this program, the Regional Housing Services Office. Since we have two new board members, I thought it would be a good idea for her to join us and talk a little bit about what the Regional Housing Services Office does. Is Liz still here? I told her to be here at 7:30. Sorry, Liz. Sorry. Are you available to give us an overview, Liz?
Yes, I am. Come on here. Hi, good evening, everybody.
Thank you for sticking with us.
Sure. Are you able, am I able to share my screen? Yes, I can.
See you, and you should be able to share your screen, yes.
Yep, great. So thank you, John. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the Regional Housing Services Office. This is in advance of your potential vote to renew for the IMA amendment. So this is our service model. This is a collaboration, as John mentioned, between these 9 towns. It's hosted through the town of Concord, and you pay a membership fee to Concord. Concord covers staffing and contracting and all the administration functions. There are 4 people in the office, and we're all contractors working through Concord. We actually have our office in Acton, right over there on Knox Trail. And you receive your housing services for this annual fee. And here at the bottom, we have some statistics, and this is for the first time ever in the 10 years of the RHSO, all the communities are in safe harbor. So that's very exciting. Some communities are, safe harbor comes and goes. So we don't know if this would be true in 2, 3, 4, 5 months, but right now, everyone is in safe harbor, and that's safe harbor for the 40B aspect. Just a moment on the leadership and how the program works. So the lead community, that's Concord, has overall management. We have an annual meeting with the town managers and the administrators to talk about the program and ideas and suggestions and comments and program overview. There's an advisory committee that meets quarterly with designees from each member community. And in Acton, that's represented by Kristen from the planning office. Annual budget process, working all year on that, starting in the fall. The appropriations usually go through CPA. And I think Acton also does CPA. So you see that at town meeting and the CPA, its own process. The budget is basically, it's an hours-based budget. So you are buying a certain amount of hours and we have an hourly rate. So that's how the services are delivered. And then we send the invoices in July. So you pay ahead for the year. We have a quarterly status report that details out all of our activity, monthly tracking of hours, and just as you could always add supplemental hours during the year. So you commit at the beginning of the year, but we do have a process where you can add more. And in fact, in FY21, we added 20% additional hours. It was really quite an exceptional year for our office. And then we do board updates to boards and committees. That's Maynard in there, sorry. We meet with the Acton group, with the Acton Housing Authority, the ACHC, and the town planning staff on a monthly basis. So just a brief recap for all the communities. Again, I mentioned that the RHSO communities are in safe harbor. We have a lot of activity in resales, and you can see that little chart off to the right. We did in FY20, there were 7 resales, in FY21, 12, and already in FY22, 5. And those resale fees that are built into the deed riders go to the towns. So that's just a little bit of money that comes in to offset. We support local support and program administration. So during COVID, we administered the ERAP program, Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We did that. Acton was very committed to that program. You could see there, allocated $100,000. We support the ACHC and all sorts of kinds of projects and development assistance. We also do trainings and workshops. We did a homeowner workshop in May with almost 20% of all the owners attending. And the owners that we track, there are 428 across the 9 communities. And next year we'll be working on fair housing with the Home Consortium is another kind of regional group. This one's managed out of Newton, and there are 5 communities, RHSO communities, that are part of that group, and they're embarking on a 5-year action plan for fair housing, including fair housing testing. FY22 goals, much of the same, continue to assist the owners and property managers. We'll move to in-person in terms of our monitoring, continue our local support and the support to staff, residents, and the different kinds of programs. We are going to hire a new part-time staff this fiscal year and offer some additional training to our constituents and continue to promote our RHSO model. There are many communities and municipalities who think this is very successful and are looking to replicate this in various ways. There are 3 total RHSO models. This is the first one. There's a group that's based out of Hudson, and there's a group that's based out of Reading. And there's another in formation. And so here's the budget. So just a lot of numbers there. I don't know what I can even say. So Acton's numbers are, so FY22 is about $34,000. That equates to 426 hours. And that's 11% of the budget. So Acton is about the same as Bedford. and also about the same as Lexington in terms of the support from our office. It's mostly staffing. There's some program expenses, and then Concord has an administrative fee for all of the infrastructure, rent, and utilities technology that goes into the office. Oh, and then I was going to say one other thing here, and it comes out to be about $80 per hour in terms of billable rate. So just completed 10 years of operation. And say thank you for continued support, because it's really a model that works best because of the leadership, the senior leadership that supports it. This is a top-down driven model. This was originated by the town managers and town leaders in the founding member towns for compliance monitoring, efficient resource use, and to work together on common solutions. And that's the presentation. So I went very quickly because I know it's very late and you have still other things on your agenda. So
Thank you, Liz. Yes, and it's a very helpful program. Some expertise always available to assist us with various matters. So the matter before the board tonight is to extend the agreement that we used to utilize this program, and the funding for this was approved at the recent town meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Liz first before she goes away? On just not necessarily on the agreement, but on the RHSO. It's a very good program. And the new agreement was in the packet, and I would take a motion to approve. Okay, yes, please, go ahead.
This is Tara from West Acton, and thank you so much, Liz, for the COVID relief. It's fabulous. I had spoken to you earlier about, years ago now, about Rehab Trust and how to structure it, and you got me a whole bunch of information, and I really appreciate that. We got down to the bottom, and you said, go build support in your community and come back. Well, I'm letting you know that we're coming back, and that the town saw fit to put housing rehab as a main goal, primarily through rehab, in the housing production plan, and but I personally would like to come with money. So we're going to be preparing a CPA grant application so that the next time you see me about Housing Trust, it will be with money, hopefully. But I want to ask you a question because it's coming up lately, and I keep meaning to contact you, but here I have all of the selectmen who are hopefully preparing goals and thinking about Rehab Trust, yay. That is it possible that we can have a regional housing rehab trust, or is it, what I've been thinking is that it should be simple and do it one time and then we'll expand later, but some people think we should just go straight to a regional, and I think that's too complicated, but I wanted to get your input. That's the first question. The second question...
Let her answer the first
Oh,
question.
okay, thanks.
sometimes in those kinds of programs with a regional approach to make sure that all of the members and the contributors agree on the contribution of funds versus the use of funds in their town. I think that's the first thing to discuss, the sharing of costs. And if you put in, I don't know, you put in $100,000 and that gets spent in someone else's town, is that okay? Just to walk through that. And then from there, I think that some of the mechanics then can flow from there. But that would be the first discussion, would be the sharing of funds across the actual units and what kind of activities would the trust do. There's probably some discussions too about the legislative or the structure of the trust and whether it would be constituted as a 501c3 or what have you.
Okay, thank you. Then there's a question that's come up about why don't we have a homeless shelter in our region? We seem to think that we're immune from homelessness and that we just ship homeless people off to other places. And I feel like that's time that we've got to start thinking about doing that ourselves, because there's a lot of homeless people in Acton, whether people want to admit it or not. And then the last question or comment is that, also, so relative to Housing Trust, I want to be clear, I want to separate that from homeless shelter, because I promised that I promised too many people that the Housing Rehab Trust would be tax neutral or close to it. So, but I did want to make the comment and hope that maybe we can all chip in, different towns, and have a a homeless shelter someplace. And then also 40B audits. I get a lot of feedback that the 40B developers are making a lot more money than they should be, and that there's an opportunity to do another audit. When we did, the state did their first audit, the Acton got like $1 million or something like that, so from developers that had made too much money. So I'm just putting that on the table, and that's it. Thank you so much, and I hope that we all vote to renew, that you guys vote to renew. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? So we did make the motion, right? Yes, I thought so. And so Jim, please call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Navarrete?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I say aye. It's unanimous. Vote, spend some money and make great things happen.
Thank you, Liz. Actually, while Liz is still here, Mr. Chair, I wondered if you would be willing to consider item 14 next, because she was going to very briefly help me explain that.
Yes, please, go ahead. That's the mass docs. Please, you or Liz, please.
Liz, could you help explain briefly what we're asking the board to approve tonight in terms of this Mass Docs joinder agreement for 446 Mass Ave?
So the Mass Docs process is the Massachusetts documents, I guess is probably what it's called, is a process used to standardize loan documents across public subsidies. So this is used for projects that receive low-income housing tax credits. And then also with the low-income housing tax credits usually come some affordable housing trust fund or housing stabilization fund or other funds from DHCD, other public subsidies. So in this project, I bet they have 8 or so public subsidies coming in. And Mass Docs is the standard process for those documents, the housing restrictions, the regulatory agreement, the loans, and the promissory notes. Acton's a lender in this project where the ACHC had committed $650,000, maybe, something like that. I'm sorry, I should know the exact amount, but I think it's that. In order to participate in a standardized format, the town would join Mass Docs through this joinder agreement, and then you are included in the Mass Docs legal counsel who will prepare all of the standard documents for you. So it's of great advantage to join Mass Docs and to be included as a standard lender in the process.
Thank you, Liz. Town council has reviewed this and is comfortable with it.
And the chair of the ACHE is as well.
Do people have any questions on the Mass Docs? Okay.
Have you heard an actual motion?
No, not yet. I was just going to ask if someone would move to approve the Mass Docs joinder agreement.
I would move that.
Excellent.
And I'll second.
Okay, great. Any more discussion? We'll vote then. Please, Jim, call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Navarrete?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault?
Aye.
I think you said yes. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
And I say yes. Off we go.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Item 13, approve the agricultural preservation restriction at Stonefield Farm. Mr. Manager.
We actually have a representative from Sudbury Valley Trustees here to speak to this as well. This is also related to a recent action at town meeting, and this is a request for the board to approve the preservation restriction that the town approved us purchasing with open space funds. Krista, I believe, is here. Krista Collins, if you could let her in, please. If she's still here.
Krista should be able to speak in a moment.
Hello.
I was fiddling with my audio. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you want me to just give a kind of brief overview of what's happening?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you for sticking with us.
Sure. So the draft agricultural preservation restriction has been reviewed by all the parties, including the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. MDR has given its approval to get the local signatures. So we will need signatures from the Board of Selectmen, the Agricultural Commission, which is voting to sign tomorrow night, Boston Area Gleaners, and Sudbury Valley trustees. And then all those signatures will have to go back to MDR for the signature of the Commissioner of Agriculture. And BAG has a closing date set with the Simeones on July 30th. So everything seems to be lining up to make that closing date. Yeah, it's just, we've gotten such amazing feedback from the community and everybody about this project. It's just really seems like a win-win-win all around. So I want to thank everybody on the Open Space Committee and CPC and everybody in town that's helped to get it to this point.
Any questions from the board for Krista? Any, what would I have, a motion to approve the agricultural preservation restriction at Stonefield Farm?
I second.
Someone has to make it.
Oh, pardon me. So moved. So moved, sorry.
No problem, no problem. It's late already. A second, please.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes.
Jim, please go ahead.
I just wanted to express my disappointment, as I have in the past, that we weren't able to find a way to require climate positive agricultural practices. I know this is not worth holding up the APR for. I'm enthusiastic about this overall project. I just wanted to put that out there in case there are future opportunities to encourage climate positive agricultural practices there, and in future agricultural deals that we're involved in.
Thank you. Have members had a chance to tour the farm?
Funny you should say that. Tomorrow morning at 11, there's a walk.
It's worthwhile.
Yeah, so if you're available, I would go out and join.
Okay, any other discussion? Then Jim, please call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Navarrete.
Hi.
Ms. Arsenault.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
And I also say aye. Another unanimous vote. Thank you for making my first time as clerk relatively easy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for sticking with us. And finally, announce receipt of the Public Health Excellence Grant establishing the Middlesex County Regional Collaborative and authorizing the signing of the municipal statement of commitment. John.
Yeah, so this is an exciting project that we've started with our neighbors. Westford was the lead community on the application. It also includes Lowell and Dracut. And what we're doing is we're actually going to hire a community health and wellness coordinator, which will support those 4 communities over the next 3 years. And so this request before the board tonight is simply to ask that we're committed to the project. And I wanted to bring it to you just to make sure, first of all, that you were aware of it, and to ask for your support for this commitment.
Any questions for John on this?
no questions, but I'm really excited about this. So I motion that we support this as a board.
Okay. Any final discussion? Oh, second. Okay, excellent. And any further discussion? Then we'll vote. Jim, please call the roll.
Okay, Ms. Nodred,
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
I also say an aye. Unanimous.
Okay, consent items, this works just like town meeting. If anyone, except we don't need a second to hold it. If you want to discuss one of these items as I'm reading it, just say hold and we'll come back to it. Approved meeting minutes, June 21st, 2021. That's number 16. 17, a request used of roads for ride to defeat ALS, September 19th, 2021. 18, accept gift Recreation Department for $150 from Ann H. Anderson and Alla Bogdanova to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. 19, accept gift Recreation Department for $25 from Ray and Susan Hunt to be used to construct a dog park in Acton. 20, accept gift Recreation Department for $3,000 from the ProTech companies to help support costs for the 2021 concerts and special events at Nara Park. 21, accept gift Recreation Department for $1,500 from Emerson Hospital to help support production costs for the 2021 concerts and special events at Nara Park. 22, accept gift Recreation Department for $1,500 from Seacrest and Bloom LLC to help support production costs for the 2021 concerts and special events at Nara Park. 23, accept gift Recreation Department for $75 from Carolyn Kingman and My Union to use for constructing a dog park in Acton. Accept gift Recreation Department for $15,500 from Stamsky and McNary to cover the outstanding balance for the total design cost of Gardner Field parking lot. 25, committee appointee Jeff Burgard to from associate to full member on the Council on Aging, term to expire June 30th, 2022. That's hold on number 25. Committee appointment, Alyssa Nickel, associate to full member, Open Space Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2024. One-day alcoholic beverage license, this is number 27, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Middlesex West Chamber of Commerce at Nara Park, July 20th, 2021. Number 28, one-day alcoholic beverage license from Lindy Vieira, Nara Park, July 19th, 2021. And 29, request to dispose of obsolete items, West Acton Citizens Library. Okay, so I will take a motion to approve consent items 16 through 24 inclusive and 26 through 29 inclusive.
So moved.
And a second?
A second.
Jim, please call the roll.
Ms. Nodred,
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
And I also say aye. Unanimous.
Excellent. And number 25, Dean, to your hold.
Yeah, I believe the expiration date would be more appropriate because this will be a full term, should be 2024 rather than 2022.
It would normally be a three-year term.
It'll be a three-year term. Mr. Burkhart has been an associate, but he's moving into a totally new role to take over for a person who has stepped off the board, and that it should be a full entire term. And while I've got your attention, there's one other item that came up, and it came in too late to get on the packet, too late to get on the agenda. Court of honor for two Boy Scouts from Troop 32.
So I'll talk about that right after the consent item, if that's okay. Dean proposes for number 25, committee appointment, Jeff Burkhardt, associate to full member, Council on Aging, term to expire June 30th, 2024. Does someone move for consent item 25?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Consent item 25 with that change. Jim, please call the roll.
Sure. Ms. Moderator.
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
And I also say aye. Unanimous.
Okay, and the final thing here is, Dean mentioned, is the Eagle Scout Court of Honor. Maybe, Dean, please go ahead.
Yeah, so two scouts will be moving up, James Dyer and Benjamin Matson, both Troop 32. Court of Honor is coming up very shortly. One of the parents reached out to me, and I don't believe...
It's July 31st.
In July 31st, and since our schedule seems to be in flux, I'm not sure we'll have a chance to take it up at another meeting before the Court of Honor. So I'd like to add that to consent, and I will attend the Court of Honor.
I don't think we need a motion for that. We just asked for a volunteer. So everyone okay with Dean attending the Court of Honor on the 31st?
Yeah.
Great. And I will take, unless someone has anything else, I will take a motion to adjourn. Okay, we can stay here later, but someone really
I move.
to adjourn. Okay, is there a second?
And seconded.
Yeah, and that's not a discussable motion, so Jim, you can go right ahead.
Okay. Who's not ready?
Aye.
Ms. Arsenault.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
And I say aye too. Thank you very much.
One more thing.